Chapter 787. Normally, the sect would have a supreme elder holding down the fort to prevent outside invasions and demonic calamities from descending. The inner sect's first elder was in charge of the internal affairs. The Haotian sect was no exception. To a certain extent, the authority of the sect's inner sect elders was equivalent to that of the sect master. The first elder's family name was Han. Xiaoqin had met him before when he made an exception and traveled far away. He did not know why the first elder was looking for him, so Xiaoqin asked out of curiosity. Shui Lingling smiled mysteriously and said, "You will know when you get there. Come with me." The two soared into the air. Under Shui Lingling's lead, they flew higher and higher. Soon, they approached the inner city. However, they showed no signs of descending. Xiaoqin felt suspicious. He looked up and used his sharp spiritual sense to look at the boundless space. He could feel something slightly different. However, he could not pinpoint exactly what was different. It was like a goose feather drifting in the air, indistinct and indistinct. Shui Lingling took out a jade strip and tossed it into the air. A light flickered in the air, and a spatial door appeared from nowhere. Then, Shui Lingling took a step forward and vanished from Xiaoqian's sight. Suppressing the doubts in his heart, Xiaoqian rushed forward and entered the spatial door before it closed. The spatial door immediately closed silently, not attracting anyone's attention. After walking in the space-time tunnel for some time, the scene before Xiaoqian suddenly opened up. Unexpectedly, there was a completely different world inside, a completely different world. When Xiaoqian looked up, the starry sky looked very strange. The sky was clearly not dark at all. However, the boundless stars on the other shore were clearly visible, both bright and dark, inspiring wonder. There was a continuous mountain range on the ground. The mountains were lush and green. Xiaoqian could see pavilions and strong spirit beasts galloping about. In the center of the mountain range was a huge platform with hundreds of huge warships parked on it. Xiaoqian observed the auras of those warships. He discovered that the lowest-ranked warships were Sage-grade secret treasure warships. However, when he looked carefully, he discovered that there were many King-grade warships. In the Sky Dome realm, the noble clans treated the King-grade warships as family heirlooms. Unexpectedly, there were so many of them here. Thousands of palaces floated in the air, surrounded by dense spiritual clouds. Looking at the spiritual vein origins suppressed under the palaces, if one counted carefully, there were at least 4 grade 1 spiritual veins suppressed under each palace. Seeing the appearance of Xiaoqian and Shui Lingling, powerful mental energy was sent out from the palaces and flew towards them. His spiritual power circled around Shui Lingling's body and then concentrated on him. Xiaoqian frowned slightly and instinctively set up a bounded domain around himself with his divine sense. However, there were still a few extremely powerful psychic forces that directly penetrated Xiaoqian's divine sense, wanting to enter his body to see clearly. Xiaoqian could not help but feel horrified. The masters of these psychic forces were all superior grade martial sages. In terms of cultivation, they were no weaker than the extreme old man. The feeling of being seen through was not a good one. Ever since Xiaoqian's Purple Thunder divine incantation advanced to the 6th layer, he had not experienced such a situation for a long time. Xiaoqian's face sank, and the purple lightning talisman in his sea of consciousness started circulating. Strands of spiritual sense carrying the might of the immortal will of thunder swept out. When those psychic forces saw the spiritual sense containing the will of thunder approaching, they all dodged, not daring to clash head-on. Some psychic forces did not manage to pull them out in time and were directly refined by Xiaoqian's spiritual sense. Muffled groans came from the palaces. Clearly, they suffered some losses. Xiaoqian felt somewhat surprised. He asked, "First senior sister, what is this place?" Shui Lingling answered, "This is the Haotian sect. This is the place of 10,000 years of accumulation. It is also where the elites of the entire sect are. You will soon become one of them." Xiaoqian now understood. It turned out that the Haotian city outside was just a facade. This was the true foundation of the Haotian sect. No wonder Shao Chen found it strange. The Haotian sect was one of the 9 ranks of the great families. Why did it only have 7 or 8 true inheritors? Furthermore, there were very few martial sages in the sect. It turned out that they all ran here. When a cultivator advanced to martial sage, their lifespan would increase rapidly, reaching 500 years. The number of cultivators who could advance to martial sage in the Kunlun realm was 1 in 10,000. The chances were extremely low. This was even lower in the Sky Dome realm. If not for the vast spiritual energy and horrifying population of the Kunlun realm, there would not be so many martial sages. However, once a cultivator advanced to martial sage, their long lifespan ensured that they could survive for a very long time. Nearly all the martial sages of the Haotian sect in the past thousands of years were gathered here. Most of the people in this secret realm were martial sages. Aside from them, there were the previous true inheritors of the Haotian sect. These people were only 1 step away from martial sage. These people were under 100 years old and were the focus of the Haotian sect's nurturing. They could be considered a reserve force of elites. If an older generation martial sage fell, they could immediately replace them. Only then could a sect be guaranteed to last a long time and not fall. Once the reserve forces could not keep up, the rank of the sect would automatically fall in less than 500 years. Such a situation was very common in the Kunlun realm. Although there were many 9 ranks of the great families, there were very few 9 ranks of the great families that could last forever. Las Ling, who is this fellow? As the two spoke, a palace flew over from the distance like a castle in the sky. The fog formed by spiritual energy scattered, and a spirited old man walked out with a smile. When Shui Lingling saw this old man, her eyes lit up. She could not help but smile gently. It is rare for martial Uncle Qin to be so free and come out of closed-door cultivation. I tried to visit you a few times, but the door was always shut in my face. However, the old man with the family name Qin laughed loudly and said, "Do you think I still do not know what you want? This purple bow of yours is already a high-ranked sage-grade secret treasure. If it is upgraded again, it will become a peak sage-grade secret treasure. This old man will not be able to endure your exploitation." Petty. Shui Lingling muttered. Then, she introduced this old man to Shao Chen. This was Elder Qin of the sect. He advanced to martial sage 500 years ago. Now, he was already a peak superior grade martial sage. Elder Qin could be considered a grandmaster level martial sage. His strength was unfathomable. Furthermore, he was very good at refining secret treasures and managed the refining pavilion in the sect. Shao Chen understood. While this old man did not put on any airs, based on Shui Lingling's introduction, he was a bona fide major character in the Haotian sect. Junior Shao Chen greets Elder Qin. Greetings, Elder Qin. Not daring to be too casual, Shao Chen performed a cupped fist salute. The refining pavilion's Elder Qin glanced at Shao Chen and revealed a contemplative expression. He wanted to see through Shao Chen. However, he felt that there was a thick layer of fog that prevented him from seeing the light. Feeling helpless, Elder Qin could only give up. He said, "Brat, you are really not simple. No wonder that Elder Bai and the others suffered at your hands. They are probably too ashamed to face others now." When Shui Lingling heard this, she could not help but feel slightly startled. The Elder Qin mentioned were all major characters of the Haotian sect. However, they were all major characters of the Supreme Sky sect. They had lived for several hundred years and possessed unfathomable strength, all Grandmaster-level martial sages. If they took another step forward, they would be able to break through to the Great Tao and become the blue-robed emperor. Unexpectedly, they suffered at Shao Chen's hands. After being praised like this by a Grandmaster-level martial sage, no matter how thick Shao Chen's skin was, he felt somewhat embarrassed. Any one of these people could kill him with a flick of a finger. Senior is joking. Elder Qin smiled and said, "I am not joking. Brat, are you interested in secret treasures? I am already so old, and my disciples are not skilled enough. If you are interested, this old man does not mind taking in a final disciple. Elder Qin's expression was somewhat stunned. He could not understand why Elder Qin suddenly wanted to take in a disciple. However, Elder Qin appeared very serious. He continued, "This old man is the pavilion master of the refining pavilion. As long as you become my disciple, you will not lack secret treasures in the future. You will be able to change the tattered items you have on you immediately." Wait, that's not right. There is still an inferior grade sage grade secret treasure in your body that has not been completely refined. Hee. This pagoda has great potential. If you become my disciple, I can immediately upgrade it to a peak sage grade secret treasure. When Shui Lingling, who was at the side, heard this, she frowned slightly. She smiled and said, "Elder Qin, you are really something. The moment my junior brother came over, you gave me a secret treasure and helped me upgrade it. I have already asked you to help me upgrade my purple bow to a peak sage grade secret treasure many times." When Elder Qin heard this, he laughed and said, "That purple bow of yours is a magic treasure from the immortal epoch. Now, it is probably no weaker than a king grade secret treasure. This old man really cannot afford to spend the resources needed to upgrade it." "Stingy," Shui Lingling said with a pout. Elder Qin smiled awkwardly and said, "Junior, have you thought it through? If you follow me and travel the boundless starry heavens, you will not have to worry about not having enough secret treasures." Xiaoqin could not help feeling tempted. After all, the other party was a grandmaster-level martial sage with more than 500 years of cultivation. His strength was unfathomable and he knew how to refine secret treasures. Taking this person as Xiaoqian's master would definitely be of great help to him. However, he was hesitant. Xiaoqin had a free personality and found it hard to abide by some rules. Ha. Old Qin, you are just a lousy blacksmith, and you want to take in such a good seedling? You are dreaming. You have to ask whether we agree or not. Resonant laughter resounded, and a few more martial sage palaces flew over. A few old men parted the spiritual fog and appeared before Xiaoqin. Shui Lingling felt somewhat shocked. She said, "Elder Bai, Elder Qi, Elder Lu, and Elder Wu, why are you all here?" Without a doubt, these people were all grandmaster-level martial sages. One of them even made Xiaoqin feel boundless pressure from his bones. The purple talisman in Xiaoqian's sea of consciousness trembled as it spun continuously. Only when the immortal inscriptions flickered did the situation take a turn for the better. Xiaoqin sized up this old man, whom Shui Lingling referred to as Elder Bai, cautiously. The other party definitely comprehended a will as well. Furthermore, his will was of a much higher level than Xiaoqian's. Elder Qin immediately fumed and glared at the old man. "Old Bai, Old Qi, why are you all here?" Elder Bai laughed loudly and said, "You are not the only one with sharp eyes." His bone age is only 23 years old, but he already comprehended 100 heavenly sage laws and the will of thunder. Naturally, we will not waste such a good seedling. Chapter 788. Several Grandmaster-level martial sages disregarded their statuses and started promising Xiaoqin all sorts of benefits, dazzling Xiaoqin. He could not help but cast a pleading gaze at Shui Lingling. Shui Lingling smiled bitterly. She understood these people's excitement at finding a good sapling. However, they could not teach Xiaoqin. Just as Xiaoqin was about to speak, a small mountain-like flame descended from the sky. A strong aura pressed down, making breathing difficult. A formless force swept over. Xiaoqin and Shui Lingling were the most vulnerable. They could not resist at all, and their bodies were pushed back uncontrollably. Boom! The flame stopped above a residence and quickly turned into a stout figure. This person had thick eyebrows, large eyes, and a squarish face. He looked like a middle-aged man. The middle-aged man wore purple battle armor that flickered with talisman scripts. An extremely heavy stench of blood lingered on his body. Clearly, he had just experienced a great battle. "Greetings, Vice Sect Master." Everyone, including Elder Bai, lowered their heads and bowed respectfully. It turned out that this middle-aged man was the Haotian sect's vice sect master. No wonder he had such a strong aura. He was probably a martial sage that surpassed grandmaster-level martial sages, someone like the blue-robed emperor. Xiaoqin lowered his head and guessed in his heart. He had not guessed that this person was Emperor Wu because of his intuition. The few of you, stop messing around. He is someone that the sect master has taken a fancy to. Even I do not have any designs on him. Elder Bai, bring some people to Blackwater Star. I already dealt with the astral beasts there, the square-faced, middle-aged man said calmly. The square-faced middle-aged man said calmly. Then, his figure flashed and he turned into a fiery light that escaped into his own palace. The moment this person left, that formless might and aura vanished. Everyone heaved a sigh of relief. Vice Sect Master's strength is becoming increasingly unfathomable. There are several rank 5 astral beasts on Blackwater Star. Soon, he will become our Haotian sect's 4th Emperor Wu. There is nothing to say about that. It is just unfortunate that the sect master snatched away such a good seedling. The few old men muttered to themselves. Then, they looked at Xiaoqin reluctantly before leaving. These words confused Xiaoqin. He raised his head and looked at the starry heavens above. Then, he asked, First Senior Sister, are we still in the Kunlun realm? Shui Lingling smiled and said, Naturally, we are still in the Kunlun realm. However, we are no longer in the Kunlun continent. We are already in the starry heavens. This is the headquarters of our Supreme Sky sect in the starry heavens, the Supreme Sky Star. You don't have to be surprised. In the future, you will know that the resources of the continent are limited. Only the resources of the starry sky are unlimited. The top sects will set their headquarters in the starry sky. After flying for about an hour, Shui Lingling brought Xiaoqin to a majestic hall in the mountains. An old man with white hair and eyebrows stood on the platform in front of the hall. He looked very amiable. This was the Haotian sect's inner sect's first elder, Han Qinghe. Greetings, First Elder. After the two landed, they performed cupped fist salutes. Han Qinghe raised his hand and smiled. Then, he carefully sized up Xiaoqin. Revealing a satisfied expression, he said, Xiaoqin, you already know what this place is, right? Xiaoqin nodded and said, I do. First Senior Sister already told me. You are the first inner sect disciple to enter this place in the past 1,000 years. You will understand how many benefits there are in the future. Han Qinghe continued in a calm tone, 1 month from now, the proud son of heaven ranking sage battle will begin. This sage battle will be different from the past. You will not fight for rankings but for slots. The moment Xiaoqin said that, even Shui Lingling found it strange. She asked, what slots? Han Qinghe explained, the Kunlun Mountain's heavenly dew divine spring is already full. The Bushin Palace obtained 10 slots. The other fiend races, the deity race, the ghost race, and the corpse race all obtained slots as well. When Ao Jiao, who was in the immortal spirit ring, heard the mention of the heavenly dew divine spring, she immediately cried out, Xiaoqin, you cannot miss out on that slot. You have to fight for it. Xiaoqin asked doubtfully, Heavenly Dew Divine Spring. What is that? It is very complicated to explain. Let me put it simply. Kunlun Mountain is a holy mountain that has existed since the immortal epoch. Even now, it is still the center of the entire Kunlun realm, the starting point of the martial epoch. There is a legendary immortal spring in the mountain, which is the current Heavenly Dew Divine Spring. By soaking in it, one's aptitude can be improved, turning a mediocre person into a genius, and a genius into a powerful demonic genius. According to legend, the cultivators who soak in this spring will definitely become Emperor Wu if there are no accidents. Furthermore, many facts have proven this point. Aside from those who died accidentally, all the geniuses who soaked in this spring became Emperor Wu before the age of 100. When Xiaoqin heard the last sentence, he could not help but feel excited. Han Qinghe smiled and said, I believe the two of you have more or less heard of the Heavenly Dew Divine Spring. The Haotian sect places its hopes on the two of you. You have to obtain 2 spots. Lingling, bring Shao Chen to the Heavenly Battle Palace. Here is my token. Give Shao Chen a Heaven Series training room. Shao Chen should not go out for 1 month. The Heavenly Battle Palace was a place where all the Haotian sect's true inheritors would be attracted to after they reached a certain stage. As long as they did not advance to martial sage, they would remain there. Hence, there would be a large age difference. However, most of them would be within 100 years of age. If they could not advance to martial sage by 100 years of age, they would be chased out of Haotian Star, never to return. The highest floor of the Haotian sect's pyramid would have nothing to do with them. However, such a thing was extremely rare. The true inheritors that the Haotian sect took a liking to had pretty good talent in the first place. With vast resources and guidance from many senior experts, they would be able to advance to martial sage before the age of 100. In normal times, those who could advance to martial sage before the age of 100 in the Kunlun realm would be considered geniuses. Ordinary martial sages could not compare to them. After all, it was unfair to use this once in 10,000 years era of geniuses as a standard. The martial epoch only had a history of tens of thousands of years. Along the way, Shao Chen asked Shui Lingling, first senior sister, it is understandable that the Heavenly Dew Divine Spring is useful to us. However, based on Elder Han's expression, it seems like if we can obtain a spot, the sect will benefit greatly as well. Shui Lingling knew that Shao Chen had always been cautious and meticulous. So his question was not strange. She explained, after soaking in the Heavenly Dew Divine Spring, our blood will contain the medicinal effects of the Heavenly Dew Divine Spring for 24 hours. At that time, as long as you and I bleed a little more, the sect will refine it into medicinal pills. The Haotian sect will have several dozen or even hundreds of martial sages. Seeing the shocked expression on Shao Chen's face, Shui Lingling smiled and said, however, don't worry. This matter will not affect us. The essence of the Heavenly Dew Divine Spring will immediately enter our bones. In the end, the only thing circulating in our blood will be some dregs. Shao Chen smiled faintly and did not say anything. He was just somewhat shocked at the effects of this Heavenly Dew Divine Spring. Just the dregs could produce so many martial sages. Shao Chen wondered if the cultivators who soaked in the Heavenly Dew Divine Spring would really become Emperor Wu before the age of 100 like the rumors said. On the mountain path, they rarely met other people. However, when they did, they were all martial sage experts. Shao Chen did not dare to underestimate any of them. These were ordinary martial sages. They were all elite martial sages of the Haotian sect. Grandmaster martial sages often led them to fight astral beasts in the starry heavens. These martial sages did not lack resources. They were far from what loose cultivators or the few Xian clan doyens could compare to. Shao Chen finally understood how vast the Kunlun realm was. The Haotian sect was not even at the peak of the 9 ranks of the great families, yet it already had so many earthen cores. How strong were the accumulations of the peak 9 ranks of the great families? What kind of scenery would the sovereign sects and sovereign noble clans be? Not to mention the other races that were still mysterious to Shao Chen. We've arrived. This is the Heavenly Battle Palace. Shao Chen looked up and saw a majestic palace in front. 3 large words were written in a flamboyant style, Heavenly Battle Palace. When Shao Chen stared at it for a while, he felt a piercing pain in his eyes. Shao Chen quickly withdrew his gaze. It looked like these 3 words had some other meaning. First senior sister, you're here again. A few men and women walked out of the palace's doors. They all had deep cultivations, all peak half-sages. However, they did not look young. The youngest among them was at least 40 years old. However, based on the average lifespan of the Kunlun realm, 40 years old was not considered middle-aged. Furthermore, one's appearance would not change too much. When the leader saw Shui Lingling, he immediately walked over with a smile. Shui Lingling was now the top true inheritor and the sect master's personal disciple. Even though these people were older than Shui Lingling, they still had to address her as first senior sister. Due to seniority, they could not simply address her that way. Clearly, Shui Lingling was familiar with the people here. After she greeted them, she said, "Junior brother Zhongyi, this is the newly arrived junior brother Shao Chen. He received orders from the first elder to come to the Heavenly Battle Palace to cultivate for 1 month." When Zhongyi saw Shao Chen behind Shui Lingling, surprise flashed in his eyes. His first reaction was that Shao Chen was too young. Based on Shao Chen's appearance, he was only about 23 or 24 years old. Zhongyi had not heard of such a young person entering the Heavenly Battle Palace in a long time. The group of previous true inheritors behind Zhongyi also showed surprise on their faces, clearly in disbelief. "First senior sister, is this true? How come I have never heard of this junior brother Shao Chen before?" Zhongyi could not help but ask. This was also what the others were thinking. Shui Lingling took out the inner sex first elder's medallion and smiled. "That is natural. The first elder's medallion is here. How could it be fake?" "That's right, who will get the Heaven Series training room for this month?" The first elder has already decided to give it to Shao Chen. The moment Shao Chen said that, everyone's expressions changed drastically. The surprise in their eyes turned into extreme shock. Is this for real? The Heavenly Battle Palace's only Heaven Series training room is going to a person who just entered the Heavenly Battle Palace. We have to have a competition every month. Only the champion can enjoy the Heaven Series training room for 1 month. The moment he arrived, he will stay there for 1 month. Chapter 789. In the Heavenly Battle Palace, the 100-odd true inheritors of the previous batches could not obtain the Heaven Series training room even after putting in blood and sweat. He obtained it so easily. This is too unreliable. All sorts of dissatisfied voices came from the mouths of the previous true inheritors. As they looked at Shao Chen, they became even more curious about his origins. Could he be the new disciple of a major character in the sect? If not for his connections, he would not have been able to obtain such preferential treatment. They could not be blamed for having such thoughts. It was normal for people to be jealous and suspicious. Furthermore, Shao Chen did look very ordinary. Zhongyi looked at the token that Shui Lingling handed over. His expression turned strange, as the token was indeed real. Shui Lingling was not lying. "First senior sister, this is going to be difficult. This time, the winner of the Heaven Series training room is Cui Hao. He has a fiery temper. Furthermore, he has been the champion of the competition for half a year in a row. It will be difficult for him to move out." Shui Lingling repeated Cui Hao's name. Then, she said in a low voice, "This is going to be difficult. However, Shao Chen is a special case. He really managed to free up this month." Shao Chen entered deep thought. This group of people had such a huge reaction. The Heaven Series training room should have a great effect on cultivators' cultivation. Otherwise, they would not have such a huge reaction. Thinking of this, Shao Chen could not help but feel some anticipation in his heart. When the others saw Shao Chen and Shui Lingling leave, they hesitated for a while before following after. They wanted to see Cui Hao's expression when he found out about this. As Shui Lingling stepped through the palace doors, the scene inside the Heavenly Battle Palace entered Shao Chen's vision. The style of the Heavenly Battle Palace's buildings could be described with 2 words, tall and large. Every pavilion was extraordinarily tall. It gave off an extremely crude and simple feeling. There was an incredibly vast drill ground in the palace, and many disciples were currently sparring in it. Seeing Shao Chen behind Shui Lingling, he stopped what he was doing. Eldest senior sister actually brought a male disciple in. Looking at their expressions, they seemed to be quite familiar with each other. This was something that had never happened before. After asking Zhongyi, who was following behind them, and finding out the ins and outs of the matter, they all revealed the same expression as the previous group of people. Holy crap! He is just a brat, yet he wants to stay in the Heaven Series training room the moment he arrived. Are you kidding me? Not to mention Cui Hao, even I am not convinced. Those who could enter the Heavenly Battle Palace were all the outstanding true inheritors of the previous batches. They all had high mental states. They were not young. Even with the First Elder's order, they were still quite dissatisfied when they saw a junior trying to step on their heads. A group of people followed him in a grandiose manner, quietly waiting for the development of the matter. Many of them were even discussing how to put Xiao Chen in his place. Standing in front of the Heaven Series training room, the blue-robed Cui Hao's expression immediately sank when he heard Shui Lingling's words. You want me to give it up? To even give it up to a brat? Shui Lingling, don't you think this is an insult to me? The skinny and capable-looking Cui Hao snorted coldly. He had a dark expression as he spoke with extreme dissatisfaction. When Shui Lingling saw that Cui Hao was not easy to deal with, she felt angry. She said sullenly, Cui Hao, this is the First Elder's order. Even the palace master has to abide by it. Cui Hao looked around and stared at Xiao Chen. He said, I don't care about the First Elder's order. I personally obtained this Heaven Series training room. I am abiding by the Heavenly Battle Palace's ancestral teachings. You want me to give it up? Sure, but you have to defeat me first. Shui Lingling still wanted to say something, but Xiao Chen smiled faintly and answered first, that suits me. I do not want people to think that I came here because of connections. Xiao Chen clearly heard the people pointing at him and slandering him. Even though he could ignore them, he still had to consider Shui Lingling's feelings. Xiao Chen, you have to think this through. Actually, what Cui Hao said makes sense. This is indeed the Heavenly Battle Palace's ancestral teachings. I think the First Elder assigned you to the Heaven Series training room because he wants to test you one last time. Shui Lingling sent a voice projection to Xiao Chen. Cui Hao is 38 years old this year, more than 10 years older than you. 10 years ago, he was already a half-sage. Previously, he was also the top true inheritor. Hence, his talent is definitely not low. Furthermore, he has been bitterly cultivating in the Heavenly Battle Palace for the past few years. Even if you grasp a will, you cannot guarantee that you can defeat him. Xiao Chen sent a voice projection back, First Senior Sister, don't worry. I am fully confident. However, even if I lose, it will just be because my skills are inferior. I will not have any complaints. Clearly, Cui Hao had not expected Xiao Chen to answer so straightforwardly. Then, he smiled and said, you are rather hot-blooded. Come with me to the drill ground. If I lose, I, Cui Hao, will not have any complaints. Just at this moment, something strange happened. Where did this nameless brat come from? He just came in, and he already wants to stay in the Heaven Series training room. Furthermore, he wants to fight with senior brother Cui. I, Tian Mao, am the first to not accept this. I, Lu Shui, am not accepting this either. I, Bai Feng, am not accepting this either. Many people in the Heavenly Battle Palace were arrogant and unruly. The people who had been discussing how to take Xiao Chen down a peg earlier all shouted together, looking quite impressive. Bang! Right after the three spoke, Xiao Chen's figure flashed. He moved like the wind, moving through the crowd and arriving before the person who spoke first. This person's family name was Tian, and he was about 40 years old. He had already been a half-sage for a long time. The heavenly sage laws behind him were all as thick as a pinky finger. Furthermore, they were extremely dense. There were more than 70 of them. With such a cultivation realm and talent, he would definitely be considered an outstanding talent of the Kunlun realm before the Great Age. However, now that the Great Age had arrived, if he still could not see the situation clearly, correct his position, and rein in the pride in his heart, he would be asking for trouble. Xiao Chen's figure flashed as he charged forward and punched at this person. The heavenly sage laws in his body surged, and thumb-thick purple ribbons of light appeared behind him. The ribbons of light moved up and down, and electric light surged. Boundless lightning attributed spiritual energy surged towards Xiao Chen's fist. When he punched, the sound of thunder and wind filled the world. When this person saw the heavenly sage laws behind Xiao Chen, his expression could not help but change. However, it was already too late for him to retreat. He could only receive Xiao Chen's punch head-on. The heavenly sage laws behind both parties formed long ribbons of light. As they danced about, whistling sounds rang out continuously. The spiritual energy of the world fluctuated intensely. Bang! A dull sound rang out. The instant the two fists clashed, blood leaked out of this person's mouth, and he immediately went flying back. The other disciples along the way quickly moved to the side. That person flew back 100 meters before he landed with some difficulty and stabilized himself. He felt his qi and blood unstable, and his right fist trembled in pain. He felt like his earlier punch had landed on a metal mountain. As he looked at Xiao Chen, who had not moved back a single step, horror appeared in his eyes. "Brother Tian, are you all right?" The other two disciples, who had been heckling, quickly rushed over and asked worriedly. The other disciples, who had moved to the side, looked at Xiao Chen in shock as well. Although this Tian disciple was not an outstanding person in the heavenly battle palace, his strength was clear for all to see. He had cultivated bitterly in the heavenly battle palace for so many years, putting in a lot of effort and sweat. Everyone could see for themselves that he was no ordinary half-sage. However, Xiao Chen still knocked him back with one punch. If this continued, he would be severely injured in less than 20 moves. What a demonic genius! Has the outside world really changed? Some people started discussing in soft voices. They had also heard about the age of geniuses. Several of them revealed sad expressions. Cui Hao's expression turned grave as well. He said, "I'll wait for you at the drill ground." After saying that, Cui Hao leaped up and turned into a beam of light, flying towards the drill ground in the heavenly battle palace. Xiao Chen leaped up and quickly followed. "Let's go. I want to see how strong this demonic genius from the outside world is." Many people held their breaths and soared into the sky, flying towards the martial arts practice field. When Shui Lingling saw this scene, she had a complicated expression. These people were the outstanding true inheritors of the Haotian sect. However, they had been born too early. They had missed the age of geniuses. Their past glory was not worth mentioning in this age of geniuses. The disappointment in their hearts was easy to imagine. The number of true inheritors this year is already full. At that time, the heavenly battle palace will have more newcomers than before. It is good to let Xiao Chen remind them in advance. With a gentle push, Shui Lingling turned into an azure light and flew towards the drill ground as well. Whoosh! Whoosh! Two beams of light landed one after another. Xiao Chen and Cui Hao stood facing each other on the vast and hard drill ground. Cui Hao, who wore tight blue robes, no longer dared to underestimate Xiao Chen. A yellow disc floated out of his body and hovered above his head. The disc gave off motes of light that looked like moonlight. These motes turned into threads encasing Cui Hao. Cui Hao stretched out his hand, and a crescent moon saber appeared in his grasp. The blade of the saber was as smooth as a mirror. Its edge was cold and emotionless. The crescent moon saber was even more beautiful than the moon. When the moonlight from the disc shone on the saber, they complemented each other, forming a beautiful scene. Xiao Chen looked at the disc above Cui Hao's head and raised his eyebrows slightly. This was a completely refined sage-grade secret treasure. It contained heavenly sage laws and could absorb the energy of moonlight. That elder Qin said that my pagoda was not completely refined. However, I feel that it is already completely refined. It looks like there are still many secrets about sage-grade secret treasures that I do not know. When I have time, I should ask him about them. Make your move. I can see the hidden saber intent in your eyes. The waning moon scimitar was pointed straight at Xiao Chen, and Cui Hao said in a flat tone. "Sorry for the offense." Xiao Chen flipped his palm and the lunar shadow saber appeared in his left hand. His right hand grasped the saber hilt. Leaping into the air, the Qing Emperor instantly executed the drawing the saber. In that instant, 72 figures of Xiao Chen appeared in Cui Hao's eyes. Each figure represented a different trajectory of the saber. Cui Hao squinted and the figures in the air merged. However, Xiao Chen drew the lunar shadow saber in his hand. Dark clouds filled the sky, and this saber strike carried a horrifying purple lightning. This saber strike was very mighty. The trajectory of the saber was unpredictable. By the time Cui Hao discovered Xiao Chen drawing his saber, the saber light had already arrived before him. Chapter 790. It was already too late to block with his saber. However, Cui Hao did not panic. The disc hovering above his head gave off a bright light, and a moonlight curtain fell. The lunar shadow saber hacked at the moonlight curtain, and electricity exploded, immediately chopping it in half. However, Cui Hao took advantage of this opportunity to retreat 100 meters, dodging this saber strike. When the moonlight curtain completely shattered, he spun the waning moon saber in his hand and charged forward. Using the secret treasure above his head, Cui Hao nimbly dealt with this troublesome drawing the saber. Even though he moved later, he managed to arrive first, gaining the initiative. Xiao Chen swung his hand back, and the lunar shadow saber blocked Cui Hao's waning moon saber. Boom! A starry sky appeared behind Cui Hao. A vast bright moon rose up, giving off a boundless radiance. Purple lightning bolts appeared behind Xiao Chen, turning into berserk pythons covered in scales. Their eyes were like lightning, and they howled in the air like they were alive. The two mysterious phenomena materialized from their respective saber techniques. The instant the sabers clashed, they immediately gave off a horrifying sound. The vast drill ground shook intensely. Senior brother Cui used the moonlight disc and the heavenly moon saber technique right from the start. He is treating that Xiao Chen as a true enemy. Lightning materializing into berserk pythons. This Xiao Chen is indeed not simple. I have only seen such a mysterious phenomenon among some older generation cultivators. The heavenly battle palace disciples who rushed over hovered in the air. Their expressions were all strangely grave. Senior brother Cui had been forced into such a state. If he still lost, it would mean that they were truly old in this age of geniuses. The new generation would replace the old. In a river, the front waves would beat the back waves. Who would be willing to be beaten to death by the front waves? The fight between the two in the drill ground intensified. The moonlight disc above Cui Hao's head gave Xiao Chen a headache. Xiao Chen's berserk lightning pythons already possessed spirituality. Without needing to think about it, they could automatically pursue and attack their opponents, creating a lot of trouble for them. However, as long as the lightning python made any strange movements, the disc would absorb the light of the bright moon behind Cui Hao. With a light shine, it would shoot out a pillar of light, striking the lightning python into a ball of lightning and dispersing it. However, Xiao Chen did not know that Cui Hao also had a similar problem. Cui Hao's moonlight disc could be used for both offense and defense. When he faced an enemy, he could gather the energy of the heavenly moon and disrupt his opponent's movements. Even if Cui Hao faced a regular inferior grade martial sage with this secret treasure, he would not fear them. However, in the face of Xiao Chen's saber technique, it was useless. It could only be used to defend against his endless lightning pythons. Their figures flashed. The crescent moon saber and the slender lunar shadow saber clashed in the air, creating sparks. Lightning flashed, and the moonlight was like snow. The martial arts practice field was overflowing with brilliance, and it was a magnificent scene. Sky Moon Slash. Cui Hao suddenly shouted and executed the killing move of the heavenly moon saber technique. The bright moon behind him suddenly disappeared and the saber gave off a bright light. A 300-meter-long saber chi in the shape of a crescent moon chopped at Xiao Chen. Earthly lightning tribulation. Xiao Chen countered with equal harshness. He did not hesitate to execute the killing move of the lightning tribulation saber technique. The 100 pythons merged into one. The purple talisman in Xiao Chen's sea of consciousness spun gently. Strands of immortal will of thunder infused into the pythons. Boom! The python formed by the tribulation lightning clashed with the saber chi in the shape of a crescent moon, resulting in a deafening explosion. Cracks appeared on the hard ground. The might of the will contained in the saber technique. No wonder this insignificant earth-ranked saber technique can clash with my heavenly moon saber technique. A strange look flashed in Cui Hao's eyes. He finally discovered something wrong with the other party's lightning tribulation saber technique. The bright moon behind him, which had disappeared, glowed again. Cui Hao's expression turned grave. At this moment, he no longer had a path of retreat, he could only fight. Flawless falling moon. Xiaochen held his saber with both hands and raised it above his head. Then, he hacked down ferociously. Cui Hao's figure quickly rose towards the bright moon behind him. Unexpectedly, this attack forced him back. Furthermore, the speed at which Cui Hao retreated was unimaginably fast. Soon, he flew across the sky and entered the full moon. This startled Xiaochen. As he looked at the bright moon growing larger, he suddenly understood. It was not that Cui Hao retreated too quickly. Instead, it was this saber strike that pulled down the bright moon in the sky. Flawless falling moon. It turned out that this bright moon would really fall. This move was somewhat similar to the moon bright like fire that Xiaochen knew in the past. However, this flawless falling moon was of a much higher level. Its might was not something that moon bright like fire could compare to. The full moon was about to fall. If it struck, the consequences would be dire. Without much time to think, the purple talisman in Xiaochen's sea of consciousness spun wildly. The light of the immortal will of thunder turned into a bolt of heavenly lightning and soared up from Xiaochen's head. Xiaochen brandished his saber at the sky, and the saber light instantly became extremely resplendent. Heavenly lightning chop. Xiaochen shouted, and the heavenly lightning formed by his will turned into a berserk python. Countless strands of electricity gathered towards it. The berserk python roared, and a small horn appeared on its head. 4 legs extended from its abdomen, and the purple scales on its body flickered with a faint golden light. Heavenly lightning chop, flood dragon transformation. The lightning flood dragon roared ferociously. Carrying the light of an immortal will, it turned into a heavenly lightning tribulation and charged at the full moon. Boom! In an instant, the lightning flood dragon crashed into the full moon in midair. A shocking explosion resounded in the sky, and the bright moon shattered. The lightning flood dragon's figure shrank by half its original size. However, its charm remained, and its might did not diminish much. With a ferocious roar, it blasted the pale-faced Cui Hao behind the bright moon into the ground like a cannonball. Bang! A large pit instantly appeared in the drill ground. When the dust settled, the faint light of the moonlight disk appeared in everyone's vision. Coughing came from the deep pit. Cui Hao jumped up and stood back on the drill ground with a charred face. At this moment, Cui Hao's clothes were tattered, and the blood on his lips had yet to dry. His hair was messy, and he looked very weak. As Cui Hao looked at Xiaochen, who had sheathed his saber, he felt somewhat dissatisfied. However, he still spat out the words with much difficulty. He said, "I lost. The Heaven Series training room is yours. Thank you for letting me win." This battle was very clean and efficient. Cui Hao was also defeated very quickly. When he saw that Xiaochen had a will and that his killing move was slightly inferior, he decisively admitted defeat. Xiaochen did not make things difficult for Cui Hao. Cui Hao was someone who kept his word. After he was defeated, he immediately gave up on the Heaven Series training room. The previous true inheritors hovering in the air had sad expressions in their eyes. Cui Hao was already the strongest among them, but he was still not a match for Xiaochen. The world had really changed. The changing winds and clouds of this era, the most dazzling stage, no longer had anything to do with them. Silent sighs resounded as the crowd left in groups of 2s and 3s, leaving behind dejected figures. Cui Hao glanced at Xiaochen and said, "If you had not comprehended a will, the result of this battle would have been hard to say." After thinking for a while, Xiaochen replied, "Perhaps. Unfortunately, There are no ifs. There are no ifs during a battle. There is only the result. After losing to a junior brother who was much younger than him, Cui Hao felt somewhat sad. He did not want to say anything more. He put away his saber and moonlight disc and silently left the drill ground. High in the sky, the heavenly battle palace's 2 vice palace masters and palace masters showed rueful expressions after watching this battle. The person in the middle was Elder Bai, whom Xiao Qin had met once before. He was also the heavenly battle palace's palace master, responsible for guiding and training the previous true inheritors. It looks like sect master's judgment was right. This fellow is indeed worthy of our Haotian sect making an exception for him. Now that we are in an age of geniuses, our Haotian sect will be able to obtain Shui Lingling and Xiao Qin. These 2 absolute demonic geniuses will be able to gain a foothold. The 2 vice palace masters spoke with joy on their faces. Only Elder Bai, who was in the middle, did not show much joy on his face. He said, I recall that the number of true inheritors in the Haotian sect this time seems to have increased to 30. The competition is still exceptionally intense. Yes. The first elder is considering transferring half of the disciples into the heavenly battle palace. Elder Bai thought for a while and said, when you and I go to Blackwater Star 7 days from now, let's bring some of the previous true inheritors along as well. Even if they are born at the wrong time, they cannot let their hearts be disturbed. These people are the hope of our Haotian sect. Inside the Heaven Series training room, Shui Lingling introduced the various facilities to Xiao Qin before taking her leave. Xiao Qin now knew why this Heaven Series training room was so attractive to others. First, there was the cultivation room. Under the prayer mat, there was a formation connected to 10 rank 2 spirit veins origins, which could double one's cultivation speed. There was also an incense burner in the cultivation room that could calm one's mind. The herbs in the incense burner were obtained from the seabed of the chaotic demonic sea, which was extremely valuable. After the incense burner was lit, azure smoke spread out, allowing cultivators to cultivate quickly without entering a state of berserking chi deviation. There were combat puppets of various ranks in the combat room. They could exchange moves with one at any time. However, one had to use the spirit gathering pearls to activate the combat puppets. There was also a kind of holy spring spiritual milk in the combat room. Consuming 1 drop would guarantee instant recovery of one's quintessence, allowing cultivators to fight with the combat puppets continuously. However, all this was not the most exciting thing. The most exciting thing was the crystal in the combat room. This crystal contained a Wu clone of Emperor Wu. Xiao Qin could activate it once a month, allowing him to exchange moves with Emperor Wu in the mental space. Just thinking about it made him excited. Emperor Wu was the name of the peak of the Kunlun realm's cultivators. He was the common pursuit and dream of millions of cultivators in the martial epoch. Being able to exchange moves with Emperor Wu personally went without saying how helpful it would be to Xiao Qin. When Xiao Qin arrived at the cultivation room, he lit the incense burner first. Strands of white smoke immediately spread out in the room. When Xiao Qin inhaled gently, his mind immediately became tranquil. Xiao Qin's chaotic thoughts instantly calmed down. His body, both inside and out, was filled with a sense of peace and tranquility. This was very mystical. Ao Jiao could not help but sigh, the Haotian sect really put in a lot of effort. The herbs in there are called deep-sea coumarins. Just half a kilogram is worth 100,000 astral coins. Furthermore, they can only burn for 3 days. Xiao Qin sized up the quiet and elegant cultivation room. He said, I have not been able to feel any bottlenecks in the Purple Thunder Divine Incantation's 6th layer. I can use this place to speed up my cultivation and not have to worry about entering a state of berserking chi deviation. Chapter 791. According to the secret manual, when the Purple Thunder Divine Incantation broke through to the 7th layer, there would be a lightning tribulation and a heart tribulation. After the official breakthrough, there would be great benefits. Xiao Qin was filled with anticipation and nervousness. According to the records, if he could not clear the tribulation, he would end up dying. There was no perfect cultivation technique in the world. The Purple Thunder Divine Incantation could cultivate both quintessence and mental energy. Furthermore, its effects far surpassed those of similar heaven-ranked secret techniques. Now that the Purple Thunder Divine Incantation had reached the 7th layer, its tribulation had arrived. Whether it could safely clear it or not, Xiaoqin was not confident. Be it the lightning tribulation or the heart tribulation, they were not that easy to deal with. After taking another deep breath of the fragrance in the room, Xiaoqin tossed aside these messy thoughts. He sat cross-legged on the prayer mat and entered a state of cultivation. There was no concept of time when cultivating. 3 days later, after the deep-sea coumarin grass finished burning, Xiaoqin slowly opened his eyes. The bottleneck of the Purple Thunder Divine Incantation's 6th layer far surpassed Xiaoqian's expectations. Even after absorbing the spiritual energy of 10 rank 2 spirit veins without restraint, he showed no signs of reaching the bottleneck. For some reason, Xiaoqin heaved a sigh of relief. However, he immediately startled awake. Although he maintained a calm mental state, in reality, he still feared the lightning tribulation and the heart tribulation of the 7th layer. If he could not clear it, he would die, turning into dust and vanishing from the world. All his glory and dreams would vanish like smoke. Xiaoqin could not help but smile self-mockingly. He raised his right hand and clenched his fist. When he felt the surging energy in his body, he muttered, "Death, it seems like the higher one's cultivation realm, the stronger one's strength becomes. The fear of death is no longer as indifferent as before. Is it because the more one obtains, the more one fears losing, resulting in one's contentment with the status quo? Between a peddler and a person of high authority, who is more afraid of death? Clearly, the latter is the latter." In the end, Xiaoqin was just an ordinary person. Even though he understood some principles, he could not do it. For now, Xiaoqin had no good way to counteract this disadvantageous mental state. The more he thought about it, the deeper his heart demon would be. Xiaoqin shook his head and stopped thinking. Then, he got up and headed for the combat room. After preparing sufficient spirit-gathering pearls, Xiaoqin activated an inferior-grade martial sage bladesman-type combat puppet to fight with him. The humanoid combat puppet had everything an inferior-grade martial sage could grasp: heavenly sage laws, heaven-ranked martial techniques, movement techniques, auras, and everything else. It even possessed a certain level of intelligence. As the other party did not feel pain, Xiaoqin would have a much harder time dealing with it than a true inferior-grade martial sage. 6 hours later, Xiaoqin ran out of Zhenyuan. He exited the combat room and took out the Holy Spring Spirit Milk from the compartment in front of the door. Drinking a drop, his quintessential essence instantly recovered to its peak state, and he charged in once more. By the time Xiaoqin could deal with the 5 inferior-grade martial sage combat puppets, he had already exhausted all the Holy Spring spiritual milk. After 3 consecutive days of high-intensity combat, Xiaoqin had gained a lot of insights and gains in saber techniques. So, he spent another day to digest these insights. During these 7 days, Xiaoqian's bitter cultivation in the Heaven Series training camp was equivalent to half a year outside. Furthermore, there were many conditions that the outside world could not create. Indeed, the Heaven Series training camp has many benefits. If only I could cultivate here for half a year. I wonder if that would be enough for me to reach peak half-sage. Xiaoqin said somewhat greedily. 1 month was simply too short. Senior brother Xiaoqin. A somewhat distant shout came from outside the courtyard of the training room. Xiaoqin raised his eyebrows and left the combat room. With a few flashes, he flew out of the courtyard. When Xiaoqin discovered that the person who came was Zhong Yi, whom he had met once outside the Heavenly Battle Palace, he felt very uncomfortable hearing Zhong Yi call him senior brother. Zhong Yi smiled and said, "I wonder if I have interrupted senior brother Xiaoqian's bitter cultivation. If so, this Zhong apologizes." Xiaoqin smiled calmly and said, "Brother Zhong, there is no need to be so polite. Just call me Xiaoqin. I have already used up all the Holy Spring spiritual milk and deep-sea coumarin grass. Coincidentally, I was just about to go out to collect more." When Zhongyi saw that Xiaochen was so low-key and did not put on any airs, he heaved a sigh of relief. He smiled and said, "In that case, I will not stand on ceremony. The palace master is preparing to bring people to Blackwater Star. He instructed me to ask if you are interested in going." Xiaochen suddenly recalled that this was no longer the Kunlun continent but the starry heavens. "I would be happy to." Xiaochen had been looking forward to the starry heavens for a long time. Now that he had a chance to experience it, naturally, he would not let it go. However, it was a pity that he would be delaying his time in the Heaven Series training room. When Zhongyi heard Xiaochen's straightforward reply, he was somewhat surprised. After all, the benefits of the Heaven Series training room were that people who had the opportunity to enter were reluctant to leave. Xiaochen smiled gently and said, "Brother Zhong, I wonder if you can tell me more about the starry heavens? I have always been curious about them." After Zhongyi heard that, he replied humbly, "Without reaching superior grade martial sage, there is no way to survive in the starry heavens. However, it is still very difficult. Only Grandmaster level martial sages can survive alone and take risks. However, they cannot leave alone for too long. Only those who are at least the blue-robed emperor can travel freely in the starry heavens and experience dangers everywhere. Hence, I do not know much. Brother Xiaochen, if you have any questions, just ask. I will do my best to answer." Xiaochen thought for a while before asking his first question. "How far is this star we are standing on from the Kunlun continent?" "I know that." Zhongyi smiled and said, "The Haotian star we are standing on is actually not far from the Kunlun continent. We just need to break through the barrier of the sky and travel 5,000 kilometers. Most of the bases that can be established in the stars are within this range. If it is too far, even Emperor Wu might not be able to protect it." 5,000 kilometers sounded very far. However, in the context of the boundless starry heavens, it was indeed very close. However, breaking through the barrier of the sky was extremely difficult. Without the cultivation of a Grandmaster-level martial sage, one would not be able to move the barrier of the sky at all. The star under Xiaochen's feet should be the one where the previous Emperor Wu of the Haotian sect spent a lot of effort and met with many fortuitous encounters to open a space-time tunnel to the main sect. Otherwise, given the strength of several martial sages on this star, they would not have been able to break through the barrier of the sky and come here alone. Through this exchange of questions and answers, Xiaochen obtained some information that he did not know before. For example, the barrier of the sky, which covered the entire Kunlun continent, existed only in the Kunlun continent. None of the other stars had such a powerful, vast, and seemingly boundless barrier. Furthermore, such a barrier had an even stronger defense against astral beasts. Even the astral beasts, which were as strong as Emperor Wu, could not break through the barrier of the sky. Due to the protection of the barrier of the sky, the Kunlun realm was free from the invasion of astral beasts. Otherwise, it would be an even more severe disaster than the demonic calamity. However, Zhongyi did not know much about some of the profound things. The Heavenly Battle Palace disciples rarely had the chance to leave the Haotian star. Furthermore, Grandmaster-level martial sages would protect them every time, preventing them from leaving on their own. As the two spoke, they arrived at the gathering place, the drill ground of the Heavenly Battle Palace. Many of the previous true inheritors were there. Aside from the disciples at critical junctures in their cultivation or those who had gone out on business, most of them were here. After all, if one was lucky, one might be able to obtain great fortuitous encounters in other unknown stars. It could be sect remnants from the immortal epoch, the cave of a mysterious powerhouse, rare ores, or wondrous items. Of course, the chances of this were extremely small, there was only a sliver of possibility. If there were truly great fortuitous encounters, the Grandmaster-level martial sages and the blue-robed emperor would have found them long ago. Xiaochen could only see if he could find some that slipped through the net. When Xiaochen appeared in the drill ground, he immediately felt several gazes. This was especially so for Cui Hao, who appeared extremely surprised. Unexpectedly, this fellow gave up on cultivating in the Heaven Series training room and came here to join in on the excitement. Others might not be able to personally experience the benefits of the Heaven series training room, but Cui Hao had stayed there for a long time and was very familiar with its benefits. When the two vice palace masters of the Heavenly Battle Palace saw Xiao Chen arrive, they nodded to themselves. Then, they started to explain some things to take note of on this trip. The black water star we're going to this time is a little different from the stars we've been to before. All the alien beasts above level 4 have been killed by the vice sect leader, but the alien beasts below level 4 are still around. So, we mustn't stray too far away from us. The main purpose of this trip is to subdue a few rank 3 spirit veins on Blackwater Star. At the same time, we can let you fight with some weak astral beasts to gain combat experience. Of course, if you obtain any wondrous items during experiential training, they will be your personal property. The sect will not care about subduing them. The two superior grade martial sage vice palace masters spoke one after another, carefully explaining the things to take note of. This was the first time Xiao Chen experienced such an adventure in the starry heavens. He listened very seriously, not missing a single word. Suddenly, urgent whistling sounds came from above. A huge shadow fell on the ground. When Xiao Chen looked up, he saw a king-grade warship flying over. The two vice palace masters knew that it was time to depart. So, they called someone over and got that person to hand out a purple jade pendant with the word, Haotian, on it to every disciple preparing to go to the starry heavens. Xiao Chen asked Zhong Yi, who was beside him, about the function of this jade pendant. The king-grade warship had its own protective barrier. With this jade pendant, one could pass through the barrier unobstructed. Jade pendants were divided into mother and son. The palace master and the vice palace masters could use the mother jade to locate the disciple with the son jade. If one ran into any unpredictable danger, they could activate the son jade to ask for help from the mother jade. At the same time, there was a star map attached to the jade pendant. There were simple markings on it, the stars around Haotian where the Kunlun realm factions were stationed. If one lost their way, they could find a star with a Kunlun realm faction to descend on. Otherwise, surviving on a desolate, abandoned star would most likely result in death. Of course, it would be best to find a star with a Tianwu domain faction or the human monarch star where Bushan Palace was. Otherwise, if one went to a star of another race, it would be just as dangerous, perhaps even more so. Chapter 792. Danger lurked everywhere in the starry heavens. It was clear that the Haotian sect had put in a lot of effort to ensure the safety of this group of disciples. Put on your jade pendants and board the warship. Whoosh! Right after the vice palace master spoke, the many disciples on the drill ground immediately leaped up and passed through the king-grade warship's protective barrier, landing on the deck one after another. Xiao Chen casually sized up this king-grade warship. It was about 300 meters long and 30 meters tall. Its entire body was pitch black, and its hull was made of Yama black gold, a rare ore found in the starry heavens. The purple banner of the Haotian sect hung on the bow of the warship, with the word Haotian written on both sides. High-ranked ancient demonic energy cannons were mounted on the deck and the surroundings of the warship. The might of the high-ranked ancient demonic energy cannons was very strong, no weaker than the full power strike of a Grandmaster-level martial sage. With 100 cannons firing together, they could instantly kill a Grandmaster-level martial sage. There was even a sage-grade ancient demonic energy cannon hidden in the mouth of a mutated beast at the front of the warship, something that could threaten a strong existence like the blue-robed emperor. Xiao Chen could even vaguely sense extremely complicated and mysterious talisman scripts on the warship's protective shield, appearing indistinct. Only when Xiao Chen infused his spiritual sense into his eyes could he see flickering golden spots of light. Xiao Chen thought to himself, this king-grade warship is not as simple as it looks on the surface. Just as Xiao Chen thought this, the bow of the warship tilted up slightly. For exhaust pipes popped out from the stern, and red flames spewed out ferociously. The warship moved at Mach 2, heading for the sky. Then, it continuously accelerated until it reached Mach 10, leaving this star. At a certain moment, Xiao Chen lost his center of gravity. His body floated up involuntarily. He immediately realized that he had arrived in the starry heavens. Although this was the first time Xiaoqin experienced something like this, he did not panic. He circulated his quintessence and landed back on the ground. The other disciples had wanted to see Xiaoqin make a fool of himself. They had not expected that Xiaoqin would not panic at all. They were all shocked. After walking on the bow for a while, Xiaoqin quickly got used to the absence of gravity. Furthermore, he discovered that the starry sky of this world was somewhat different from the starry sky of his previous world. When Xiaoqin turned his head back and looked at his surroundings, he saw the boundless starry sky. The visual impact of the boundless starry sky was many times stronger than when he was on the ground. This was not the first time the other disciples on the bow had seen such a scene. However, the shock in their hearts was not any less than Xiaoqian's as they stared at their surroundings. The outer space was not peaceful. Meteorites would fly toward the battleship from time to time. The advanced magic cannons around the battleship had not stopped firing since they arrived in the outer space. Resplendent beams of light blossomed in the starry sky, shattering the incoming asteroids. Otherwise, if they crashed into the barrier at such a terrifying speed, it wouldn't be a small matter. Xiaoqin lowered his head and fiddled with the jade pendant on his chest. He recalled that the jade pendant contained a map of the nearby starry sky. Feeling curious, he sent in his spiritual sense. A three-dimensional star chart immediately appeared before Xiaoqin. The battleship and the people around him seemed to have disappeared. He felt like he was standing alone in the outer space. The stars on the star chart were marked with various colors. Blue stars indicated that other factions of the Kunlun realm were stationed there. The other colors of different shades indicated the danger level of the stars. The stars on the star chart were not fixed. They moved at high speeds at every moment, giving off a very wondrous feeling. As Xiaoqian's gaze moved, the star chart would slowly move. When he looked closely, the small stars would grow larger. However, this star chart was clearly just an ordinary continent. The starry sky marked was not particularly vast, and many things were rather crude. After the novelty vanished, Xiaoqin felt that it was no longer interesting, so he withdrew his spiritual sense. Just as Xiaoqin withdrew his spiritual sense, he looked into the distance with his peripheral vision. 10 odd clumps of light burning with scarlet flames quickly flew towards the warship. The scarlet flames looked very dazzling in the dark starry sky. It's a flame crystal rock. Several disciples at the bow of the warship cried out excitedly, their eyes lighting up when they saw this item. The two vice palace masters guarding the bow of the warship were somewhat astonished as well. Then, they smiled and said, "It really is a flame crystal rock. Unexpectedly, we are so lucky. When we come over later, make your move. However, remember not to stray too far from the warship." However, Xiaoqin frowned slightly. His spiritual sense could see much further than the mental energy of the two vice palace masters. He could see a young man with a dark and sullen expression sitting on a black throne behind the 10 odd clumps of light burning with scarlet flames. There was a clump of pitch-black clouds below the throne. The dark-faced man drove the throne forward quickly, chasing after the scarlet clumps of light in front. The entire throne gave off a deathly aura. Xiaoqin felt a strange sense of familiarity. The scarlet throne in his sea of consciousness started shaking restlessly. After absorbing a flame crystal rock, a cultivator would have a high chance of comprehending the state of fire. After a cultivator with the state of fire absorbed the flame crystal rock, the might of their state would become even stronger. It was even possible to directly comprehend a will after absorbing some of the higher quality flame crystal rocks. Of course, such peak-grade flame crystal rocks were extremely rare. Furthermore, they were worth cities. Very few people discovered them. Clearly, none of the flame crystal rocks flying towards the king-grade warship contained any peak-grade flame crystal rocks. Otherwise, the two vice palace masters would not have been able to hold themselves back. However, their value could not be underestimated. Furthermore, there were many of them. Just one would be enough to make a small fortune. The scarlet clumps of light became increasingly distinct. With just the naked eye, one could see the red crystals within the flames. Whoosh! 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 Many figures soared into the air, flying towards the scarlet clumps of light. The two vice palace masters glanced at the unmoving Xiao Chen. Then, the old man on the left said, "Xiao Chen, go and fight for it as well. As long as you do not stray too far from the worship, you should be safe for 4 hours. There is no air in the starry heavens. At first, you will not be able to control your speed. You should get used to it first before you go and fight for the flame crystal rocks." The person on the right gave some advice. Xiao Chen could not help but smile bitterly. Naturally, he wanted to fight for the flame crystal rocks. Even if he could not use them, he could still exchange them for a large sum of astral coins. However, the throne that the mysterious man chasing from afar was clearly the death throne of the evil monarch throne. It came from the same source as Xiao Chen's massacre throne. Ao Jiao once said that the evil monarch throne was split into 7. Each of them represented a high-ranked state. As long as one could snatch and merge the other party's throne, they would be able to gain another high-ranked state. Aside from the energy states of wind, water, fire, thunder, and earth, there were also states of massacre, destruction, immortality, ruin, death, despair, darkness, and other even more difficult to comprehend high-ranked states. With each additional state, a cultivator's strength would increase by leaps and bounds. If that mysterious man sensed that Xiao Chen had the massacre throne, he would definitely charge over without a care for anything else. As for the rumor that the evil monarch was reborn after merging the 7 thrones, no one would believe it. "Xiao Chen, don't worry. You will take this step eventually. It is good to familiarize yourself with it now." The two vice palace masters continued to console Xiao Chen. They thought that Xiao Chen was worried about the unfamiliar environment of the starry heavens and was unwilling to go out. Xiao Chen's bitter smile turned into a conflicted one. He had no choice but to go out now. He controlled his mental energy in his sea of consciousness and wrapped the restless scarlet throne in layers. Xiao Chen understood the principle of possessing a jade ring in one's pocket. He had not used the scarlet throne all this while because he was not strong enough. Once it was exposed and attracted the attention of some experts, it would be a huge hidden danger. With a gentle push, Xiao Chen instantly passed through the protective barrier of the warship and arrived in the boundless starry heavens. The instant he exited the barrier, he clearly felt the pressure on his body decrease. His speed automatically increased by 20%. Without the obstruction of air in the starry heavens, one would be much faster than in the Kunlun continent. After reaching a certain level of speed in the Kunlun realm, one would hit a bottleneck. Only by entering the void would one be able to increase one's speed. However, tearing the void of the Kunlun realm was something that even Grandmaster-level martial sages could not do. After adapting to his surroundings, Xiao Chen held his breath and circulated his quintessence. Then, he looked at the situation in front of him. Cui Hao took the lead, nimbly dodging the meteors in the starry heavens, rushing ahead of everyone else. He was the closest to the 10-odd clumps of scarlet flames, his eyes filled with excitement. "Ao Jiao, I used my mental energy to envelop the throne in several layers. That fellow should not be able to discover it, right? That should not be the case. If you can still be discovered, the result will be the same whether you leave the warship or not." This conversation allowed Xiao Chen to relax. As for the flame crystal stones, they were not something that he urgently needed. If he could fight for them, he would. Xiao Chen executed the thunder dragon steps and narrowed his eyes. Then, he quickly dashed forward, overtaking a large group of people and flying side by side with Cui Hao. "Ha! I might lose to you on land, but it is impossible for you to defeat me in the starry heavens," Cui Hao said to Xiao Chen beside him. Cui Hao said sullenly to Xiao Chen, who was beside him. Then, he increased his speed again, leaving Xiao Chen far behind. Hearing Cui Hao's mocking words, Xiao Chen smiled faintly and ignored him. He continued flying forward at a constant speed. "Good. The first flame crystal stone is mine." Cui Hao revealed an expression of joy. Then, his figure moved, heading for the long flame crystal stones. Then, he stretched out his hand, wanting to grab a flame crystal stone. His quintessence surged, and a flame crystal stone immediately left its original trajectory and flew towards Cui Hao. The joy on Cui Hao's face deepened. He stepped forward and tried to grab the flame crystal stone. Scram! How dare you snatch something that I, Wang Can, have my eyes on? A ferocious shout suddenly came from the distance. Suddenly, a black energy appeared in front of Cui Hao and swept over like a whip. The flame crystal stone that was about to fall into Cui Hao's hand was instantly knocked away. The black quintessence's might did not diminish, continuing to sweep towards Cui Hao. Chapter 793. A Corpse Race Cultivator. Cui Hao's expression changed slightly. A scimitar appeared in his hand, and he sent out a crescent moon-shaped saber chi to scatter that black chi. However, the black chi did not disappear immediately. It wrapped around the scimitar and spread downwards, looking like the arm of a demon. It looked extremely strange. A light flashed, and Cui Hao circulated some quintessence to get rid of the black chi from the scimitar. When Cui Hao looked up, he saw a young man with a dark complexion standing on a black cloud. This young man held a long whip in his hand, looking very lifeless. However, this young man's eyes were exceptionally sharp. When he stomped on Cui Hao felt an unparalleled sharpness. Where did this corpse race cultivator come from? He is so young, and he is already a peak half-sage. Cui Hao thought to himself in shock. Xiao Chen, who had rushed over, casually scooped up the flame crystal rock that had been knocked away. The scarlet flame vanished. A dark scarlet crystal the size of a marble appeared before Xiao Chen. He could not help but feel somewhat disappointed. Based on the color and size, he could guess that this flame crystal rock was of inferior quality. He glanced at Cui Hao and the mysterious corpse race cultivator, who were facing each other. Then, he shifted his gaze to the flame crystal rock, which continued to fly. Among the 10-odd flame crystal rocks, there would definitely be one with an above-average quality. However, Wang Can, who was seated on the throne, smiled sinisterly. Then, he soared into the air, and his figure flickered. Riding on a thick cloud, he arrived before the large group of flame crystal rocks. Wang Can swept out with the whip in his hand, and a berserk wind blew. The trajectory of the 10-odd flame crystal rocks was completely disrupted. Then, Wang Can swung his whip again, and 3 or 4 flame crystal rocks flew into his hand. Then, he smiled coldly at the pursuing Cui Hao and pointed to the air. 2 stone coffins appeared in the air, one in front and one behind, blocking Cui Hao. The doors of the coffins opened, and a horrifying corpse chi poured out. 2 sinister demonic corpses wearing heavy stone armor launched themselves at Cui Hao. The full moon disk in Xiao Chen's body hovered above his head, sending down a silk-like screen of light. Cui Hao held the waning moon curved blade and heavily chopped the chest of the demonic zombie in front of him. A muffled sound rang out. This saber strike actually didn't break the stone armor on the demonic corpse's chest. It only left a shallow mark and knocked it back 10 meters. The demonic zombie behind him took the chance to charge over. Its 5 black fingers were as sharp as knives, stabbing into the curtain of the full moon wheel. To Cui Hao's surprise, the moonlight curtain was unable to block the demonic corpse's attack. A black corpse chi lingered on its fingertips. The curtain seemed to be corroded and was easily pierced by the demonic zombie's fingers. The demonic zombie laughed cruelly and grabbed Cui Hao's back with its 5 fingers. At this moment, Cui Hao had just repelled the demonic corpse in front of him. There was no time for him to dodge. The corpse energy on the fingertips might contain the will of death, and it would be a fatal blow to him. Just as the demonic corpse was filled with terror, a loud sound came from behind it. A foot pressed down on the demonic corpse's head, and a huge force surged out, sending the demonic corpse flying several thousand meters. Bang! An interstellar meteorite whizzed over and collided with the devil corpse. The meteorite shattered into pieces, but the devil corpse wasn't damaged in the slightest. This corpse is extraordinarily strong, Xiao Chen thought to himself. This demonic corpse is much stronger than the demonic corpses refined by the Dark Church in the Sky Dome realm. Many thanks. After escaping with his life, Cui Hao thanked Xiao Qin sincerely. He had been too careless. Xiao Qin smiled faintly and pointed to the front. Cui Hao suddenly understood. There was still one more demonic corpse that he had not dealt with. Now was not the time to thank him. Xiao Qin looked around. With this delay, the genius corpse race cultivator called Wang Can had already snatched away the 10-odd flame crystal rocks. That's not right. He did not snatch them away. A grave expression flashed on Xiao Chen's calm face. Just as the other party's whip was about to snatch away the last flame crystal rock, the flame crystal rock actually managed to struggle free. A resplendent electric light burst out from under Xiao Chen's feet. He executed Thunder Dragon steps at full power. Then, he raised his leg and leaped, instantly crossing the 5-kilometer distance. Xiao Chen stretched out his hand and grabbed the last flame crystal rock. The scarlet flame vanished, and a deep-colored, crimson crystal appeared in his hand. Xiao Chen's face lit up in joy. He said, "It really is a superior grade flame crystal rock. It looks like I guessed right." The few Haotian sect disciples who had rushed over in advance but did not dare to act rashly because of Wang Can felt envious when they saw this scene. "You are seeking death." However, Wang Can was enraged. One superior grade flame crystal rock was worth more than all the flame crystal rocks he had collected. Wang Can's whip extended infinitely, looking like a raging venomous black snake as it hacked at Xiao Chen. Holding the flame crystal rock in his left hand, Xiao Chen raised his head slightly and looked at the incoming black whip. Then, he stretched out his hand and firmly grasped the whip. When Wang Can, who was on the death throne, saw Xiao Chen grab his whip without letting go, he could not help but mock him. To think that Xiao Chen dares to compete in strength with a corpse race cultivator. He is overestimating himself. Wang Can's steel-like hands pulled back, trying to pull Xiao Chen over. However, Wang Can felt like he was pulling a mountain on the other end of the whip. It did not budge at all. His expression turned slightly unsightly as he asked, "You can't pull it?" Xiao Chen smiled coldly and gently pulled with his right hand. Whoosh! Wang Can, who was on the death throne, flew into the air. In terms of vital qi, Xiao Chen completely surpassed his opponent. The direct disciples from the previous batches who saw this scene from behind undoubtedly inhaled a breath of cold air. Among the 5 clans of the Kunlun realm, the Corpse clan was famous for their strong physical bodies. Even the demon race, who had always boasted of their powerful bodies, was slightly inferior in front of the Corpse race. The Corpse race and the Ghost race both cultivated the great Tao of death among the 5 races of Kunlun, but the direction of their development was completely different. The Corpse race studied the refining methods of all kinds of demonic corpses and demon corpses. They refined the corpses of all kinds of powerful existences. Whether it was the corpses of humans, demons, or spirit beasts, they would not let go of anything. In fact, they would even use the corpse refinement technique on themselves to pursue a realm where they were neither alive nor dead, using their corpses to prove their Tao and become the corpse god. Among the 5 races, they were the least welcomed by the other races. It would be the same no matter who it was. How could a race that was always eyeing one's ancestral graves make one feel at ease? However, even though the Corpse race did not have as many people as the other races, they had been able to survive for tens of thousands of years, and their inheritance had never been destroyed. Of the ancient 100 races, several strong races had vanished like smoke in the long river of history. The Corpse race being able to do this had a lot to do with their monstrous body tempering cultivation technique. However, a peak half-sage of the Corpse race with an extremely horrifying physical body ended up being pulled out by Xiao Chen. How could anyone not be shocked? Wang Can showed a startled expression. He had not expected the other party to pull him up while he was distracted. However, Wang Can reacted quickly and decisively let go. Then, he charged at Xiao Chen with a cold gaze. He was very confident in his physical body. Among the cultivators of the same generation, no one could defeat him in close combat. He had just been careless earlier. However, Wang Can was disappointed. It was not because he had been careless that he lost to Xiao Chen in a competition of physical bodies. Instead, it was because he was truly inferior to Xiao Chen. In terms of physical bodies, Xiao Chen had a rank 2 sage body and consumed many natural treasures. In terms of vital qi, he had more than 1 million tons of force. Bang! 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 The two exchanged 3 moves. Finally, their fists clashed. The moment their fists clashed, Wang Can was knocked back by Xiao Chen. However, Xiao Chen also felt his fingers go slightly numb. Wang Can's body seemed to have been separated from flesh and blood, like some kind of divine metal. Raising his eyebrows slightly, Xiao Chen thought to himself, the corpse race's body tempering technique cannot be underestimated. Although Xiao Chen thought this, he did not stop moving. He casually tossed aside the black whip in his hand and executed Thunder Dragon steps to charge at this person. Xiao Chen had long wanted to experience the experts of other races. If there was an opportunity, it would not be a bad idea to snatch away that death throne. After being knocked back by Xiao Chen's punch, Wang Can was both startled and furious. He somersaulted and sat back down on the death throne. As Wang Can watched Xiao Chen chase after him, the black mark on his forehead flickered. The black clouds under the throne started churning continuously. Sitting on the death throne, Wang Can, who had been in a sorry state earlier, now looked like a sovereign of the night. A decaying aura of death spread out. Wang Can unhurriedly threw a palm strike at the pursuing Xiao Chen. Strands of black smoke came out of the throne. Like tentacles, the black smoke wrapped around Wang Can's palm and extended to his palm, forming the word, death. Xiao Chen chased too quickly. Even if Wang Can wanted to retreat, he could not. The instant the word, death, formed, Wang Can's palms charged forward with explosive vital qi. This palm strike contained more than 1 million kilograms of force. Xiao Chen would be able to crush a mountain. However, Wang Can remained seated on the death throne, not moving at all. However, the black clouds under the throne churned even more intensely. A will of death spread out from Wang Can's palm. Before Xiao Chen could execute the immortal will of thunder, he was knocked back. His qi and blood surged, and hot blood rushed to his head. A black death qi wrapped around Wang Can's palm. His life force quickly faded, and he started rotting at a visible rate. In mere moments, Xiao Chen's smooth and white palm aged rapidly. It was as thin as a stick and filled with cracks. It looked like the palm of an ordinary person in his 70s or 80s, looking very horrifying. That deathly aura was still spreading and rushing upwards. The group of people in the distance was horrified. The will of death was actually this horrifying. Xiao Chen looked at his palm and frowned slightly. However, he did not worry too much. Xiao Chen had an even bigger problem. The mental energy of the massacre throne was like a cocoon in his sea of consciousness. After the other party released the will of death, cracks started to appear in the cocoon, showing signs of breaking free at any moment. Xiao Chen flung his hand, and the immortal will of thunder turned into a thunder fire, slowly eliminating the death qi on his arm. Sizzling sounds rang out, and black smoke came out. Chapter 794. Xiao Chen's lifeless palm immediately regained its luster and recovered to its original state. His fingers were as nimble as before. Wang Can narrowed his eyes and said sullenly, "You comprehended the will of thunder. No wonder you dare to snatch my, Wang Can's, things. However, if this is your trump card, you still have to die." Xiao Chen did not want to expose the secret of the Scarlet Throne. However, the other party pressed on. He had no choice but to draw the lunar shadow saber and fight. Black clouds churned, and muffled thunderous sounds rang out continuously. Wang Can, who was seated on the throne, charged over with the might of the dead. The two quickly exchanged moves in the starry heavens. As the will of death pressed on, more and more mental energy cracks appeared in Xiao Chen's sea of consciousness. On the Haotian sect's king-grade warship, the two vice palace masters looked into the distance. When they saw this battle, they could not help but frown heavily. That throne seems to have been left by the ancient evil king. Unexpectedly, a descendant of the corpse race managed to obtain it. The throne is split into 7. The corpse race cultivates the death Tao. It is a perfect match for them to obtain the death throne. Xiao Chen is probably in trouble. It is not convenient for the two of us to make a move. I believe the corpse dragon worship of the corpse race is not far away. Let's see how it goes. If Xiao Chen's life is in danger, we will have to make a move even if we don't want to. We can only hope that the other party does not send a king-grade warship. As the two spoke, they steered the warship towards where Xiao Chen and Wang Can fought. At the same time, they brought in the scattered Haoyan sect disciples. Their gazes never left Xiao Chen and Wang Can. The moment they sensed that something was wrong, they prepared to make a move. When Wang Can saw the warship flying over and 2 strong superior-grade martial sages, his expression did not change. Every move he made was extremely lethal. Based on the situation, Xiao Chen feared exposing the throne, so he was very conservative. Before the surging Wang Can, he could only defend. Hand over the superior-grade flame crystal rock, and we will end today's matter. Wang Can felt that he already held the upper hand. The 2 superior-grade martial sages of the Haoyan sect were already here. It was impossible to kill Xiao Chen, so he could only quit while he was ahead. Kacha! However, just at this moment, something strange happened. The mental energy wrapped around the Scarlet Throne in Xiao Chen's sea of consciousness shattered. A berserk-killing aura surged out. Under Xiao Chen's feet, a red cloud rolled up and down. The blood-colored massacre throne lay quietly on top of it, waiting for its king. The moment the Scarlet Throne appeared, Wang Can's expression completely changed. He said somewhat excitedly, "The massacre throne. Ha ha ha. Looks like my luck is extraordinarily good. I actually managed to run into the massacre throne." "That's right, your luck is really extraordinary." Now that the secret was exposed, the killing chi on Xiao Chen's face finally gathered. His cold voice was like a bone-piercing cold light, causing Wang Can to feel a chill for some reason. Boom! Xiao Chen sat down gently and leaned back on the throne. His soaring aura turned into a red light and rose up. Vaguely, there seemed to be a 30-meter-long golden dragon soaring within the red light. At this moment, the King True Dragon's aura was released together with the state of massacre without any suppression. The horrifying might instantly pushed back Wang Can's aura, suppressing him to the point that he could not breathe properly. Wang Can's clothes and hair fluttered wildly behind him. He looked like he was about to fly up. Xiao Chen smacked his palm on the armrest, and the will of death in the throne surged and gathered. A black light soared into the sky. The mark on Wang Can's forehead flickered continuously. The might of the will of death clashed wildly with the might of Xiao Chen's massacre true dragon. A strange scene appeared in the boundless starry heavens. 2 beams of light, one black and one red, intertwined and formed a cosmic storm. The meteors flying in the surroundings all deviated from their original trajectories and spun around the 2. After the secret of the throne was exposed, Xiao Chen no longer held back. He combined the state of massacre with the King True Dragon to form a vast might and clashed with Wang Can, not backing down at all. The purple talisman in Xiao Chen's sea of consciousness spun gently, ready to deal a fatal blow at any moment. Wang Can's swarthy face looked extremely unsightly. I can clearly feel that he has not signed a contract with the existence in the throne, unable to raise his state to the will of massacre. Why can't my will of death hold the upper hand? Why do I have to work so hard? Furthermore, I even seem to be at a disadvantage. As the auras clashed, the cosmic storm around the 2 became even more ferocious. Not only could the meteors flying in the surroundings deviate from their trajectories, but the suction it formed even pulled the distant meteors over. More and more meteors gathered. In the blink of an eye, tens of thousands of meteors had gathered. As they spun, they formed a 3-kilometer-tall cluster of meteors. Through the cracks between the meteors, one could see 2 thrones, one black and one red. They faced each other and spiraled up. The clothes of the two people on the thrones fluttered, and their long hair fluttered. When the two thrones were about to leave the cluster of meteors, the two squinted and stood up at the same time. Kill. Die. Horrifying energy mixed with a boundless aura burst out at the same time. The tens of thousands of meteors instantly turned into dust. The starry heavens churned endlessly, scattering everywhere. The previous true inheritors on the Hautian sect's king-grade warship were all stunned when they saw this magnificent scene. The cluster of meteors turned to dust. Amid the dust, Xiao Chen's peak state of massacre combined with the king-grade true dragon chi formed a golden kill character. Boundless black death chi poured out of the throne behind Wang Can. The horrifying will of death formed a sinister black death character in the air. The two pointed at each other, and the golden kill character and the black death character clashed violently in the starry heavens. A will was a will, after all. It was one level higher than a state. The peak state of massacre combined with the king-grade true dragon chi might be stronger in terms of might and pressure, but there was a huge difference in the destructive power of the two. Pu Ci. The golden kill character scattered and turned into strands of wandering massacre chi moving around in the starry heavens. Wang Can revealed a sinister smile on his pitch-black face as he shouted, "Kill!" The slightly weakened death character turned into a slender black sword and chopped at Xiao Chen furiously. This was the form of his will, the sword of the dead. At this moment, Wang Can's eyes brimmed with confidence. Although his will of death had lost some of its might due to the clash with the peak state of massacre, it was still a piece of cake. However, it was still a piece of cake for the will of death to defeat the will of energy. Once Wang Can used this sword, he could easily break Xiao Chen's will of thunder. Then, he could snatch the massacre throne and advance to an unrivaled half-sage. However, there was always a subtle difference between one's thoughts and reality. Xiao Chen's will of thunder was not an ordinary will of thunder. It was the immortal will of thunder. It was a copy of divine lightning and an immortal talisman. If it were a complete will of death, it might have the advantage of a high-ranked will. It might be able to compete with Xiao Chen's immortal will of thunder. However, how could the will of death, which had exhausted a significant portion of its strength? A purple light flickered on Wang Can's forehead, and the talisman with the immortal talisman on it flickered. Electric light tore through the air, and the black sword instantly exploded into nothing. Wang Can vomited a mouthful of black blood. Before he could do anything, the purple talisman carrying the might of immortal thunder flashed and gave off a dazzling light in the starry heavens. By the time the electricity stopped, Wang Can had already been sent flying 5 kilometers away. Many large meteors had been turned to dust by him. A bloody hole the size of a bowl had appeared in his chest, and sparks were still flickering non-stop. When Xiao Chen raised his head to take a look, he felt slightly startled. I wonder what material this fellow's physical body is made of. Even the will talisman cannot pierce through it. Xiao Chen could clearly see that Wang Can was not wearing any inner armor or secret treasure. However, this had nothing to do with Xiao Chen. At this moment, Wang Can had already lost his ability to fight and was no longer a threat to him. Xiao Chen gently pushed off the starry heavens and arrived before the death throne. A fervent expression appeared in his eyes as he stretched his hand out to grab the throne. Just at this moment, Xiao Chen sensed extreme danger. In the distant starry heavens, 3 black dragon breaths pierced through the starry heavens, heading for Xiao Chen. As long as Xiao Chen made a move to grab the death throne, he would immediately be struck by these dragon breaths. He might be crushed into a bloody mist, dying without a complete corpse. On the Hautian sect's warship, the 2 vice palace masters exclaimed in shock, 3 black dragon breaths. It really is a king-grade corpse dragon warship. Xiao Chen, quickly retreat. That is a black dragon breath refined from a true dragon corpse. You cannot block it. The vice palace master on the left quickly sent a voice projection to Xiao Chen, instructing him to retreat. Xiao Chen's face sank. However, he did not intend to give up. He had long expected that there would be a major faction following Wang Can, otherwise, he would not have been so afraid of the throne being exposed at the start. Just Wang Can alone would not have made him feel this way. However, now that the throne was exposed, if he left like this, he would not be able to obtain any benefits. Furthermore, he would expose the fact that he had a valuable treasure on him. He would not be satisfied with that. Xiao Chen glanced around, and two beams of light, one purple and one white, flashed in his eyes. The lunar true flame and the purple thunder true fire chased each other in the air. In the blink of an eye, they formed a Taiji yin-yang flame diagram with the 8 trigrams, the 4 divisions, and all sorts of profound talisman scripts. The 4 divisions holy beasts flashed in the Taiji yin-yang flame diagram, forming a complete scene. What is he doing? The vice palace master on the left revealed heavy doubt in his eyes, unable to understand. It's over. The black dragon breath can easily kill an inferior grade martial sage. We do not dare to clash head-on with it, the vice palace master on the right sighed in despair. A golden light flickered, and the Taiji yin-yang flame diagram gave off a bright light. To everyone's astonished gazes, it unexpectedly blocked the 3 dragon breaths. However, it only blocked them for a second. However, this 1 second was enough to do a lot of things. Xiao Chen stretched out his hand and tossed the death throne into his universe ring. Then, electric light erupted under Xiao Chen's feet as he quickly headed for the King Grade warship. The black shock wave surged out in all directions like a wave of death. Meteors silently turned into powder. The shock wave arrived too quickly. Xiao Chen could not dodge it completely. He activated the Sage Grade Pagoda in his chest and formed a pagoda image encasing his body. Chapter 795. The image shattered, and Xiao Chen tumbled a few times. Then, he vomited a large mouthful of blood. Not daring to look back, Xiao Chen pushed off the air and continued flying towards the King Grade warship. You run pretty fast. A deep voice came from behind Xiao Chen. There was a blurry black figure in the distance with black chains tied around its wrists. A horrifying aura came from the black figure, suppressing everyone. This was a ruthless character that Xiao Chen could not deal with. Hu Qi. Suddenly, a fiery light flew in front of Xiao Chen. The figure landed and arrived behind Xiao Chen, helping him block his pursuers. It was the Heavenly Battle Palace's palace master, Elder Bai. He held a 1-meter-long scarlet sword surrounded by flames. Then, he chopped at the strange black figure. Bang! This sword strike sent the black figure that made Xiao Chen feel suffocated. The fiery light spread out, looking very resplendent in the starry heavens. When Xiao Chen landed on the deck of the King Grade warship, he clearly saw that the black figure was a demonic corpse that was completely black and as tough as frost iron, without any signs of life. Behind the demonic corpses was an old man from the corpse race holding a long whip. He was facing Elder Bai. When that corpse race old man saw Elder Bai appear, he frowned heavily. A Grand Master level martial sage who comprehended a will arrived. This is going to be problematic. The old man swung the whip in his hand. It seemed to have some magical power, and the demonic corpse with chains around its limbs quickly flew over from a distance and stood guard in front of this person. When one looked carefully, one would discover a 1-meter-long wound on the demonic corpse's chest. No matter what one did, it would not heal. Disgusting liquid continuously poured out of that wound. This was the result of Elder Bai's earlier sword strike. Scram, you thing that is neither human nor ghost. Elder Bai loathed the corpse race. When he saw that demonic corpse, his expression turned terrifyingly sullen as he spoke rudely. When the corpse race old man heard this, he became enraged. However, he could feel the formless light of the will of fire and the thousands of thick heavenly sage laws behind him. He swallowed his words, not daring to say anything more. Elder Bai was a Grand Master level martial sage who had comprehended the will of fire to 60% comprehension. As long as the opponent was not a blue-robed emperor, he would not have any misgivings. The corpse race cultivator seemed to have received a voice projection. He said coldly, "Give your clan's junior a reminder. In the future, if there is nothing to do, it is best not to leave the Tianwu domain." After saying that, his figure flashed, and he put away the demonic corpse, preparing to return. Shameless boasting. With a furious roar, Elder Bai pushed the power of his will of fire to the limit. Xiao Chen's heavenly sage laws danced wildly behind him as he sent out a 300-meter-tall flaming sword screen. Then, he charged over like a surging river. The old man from the corpse clan jumped in fright. This guy had used his full strength when he attacked. Clearly, he wanted to kill him. Save me. Rumble. In the starry sky, a cloud of dust dispersed. 3 gigantic corpse dragons were chained together, pulling a black palace. A black-robed old man flew out of the palace. The black-robed old man flew forward and sent out a clump of corpse flame containing the will of death. Then, he silently assimilated Elder Bai's flaming sword screen. In an exchange of pointers between the younger generation, our skills are inferior. Our corpse god palace has already admitted defeat. There is no need for you to be so overbearing. Elder Bai narrowed his eyes. He saw a small golden corpse sitting cross-legged on the chest of this person's black robes. A light flickered in Elder Bai's eyes. In the end, he snorted coldly and turned to leave. Both sides feared each other and did not dare to make a big move. The chaos caused by the flame crystal stones came to an end, and they left together. Palace Master, why did they not even want the death throne and just let us go? The 2 vice palace masters asked, feeling it was strange. The death throne was a treasure left behind by the ancient evil king. It was compatible with their death great Tao. Elder Bai said sullenly, I believe that the death throne has some other uses. Xiao Chen, you had best not place your mark on the death throne. Xiao Chen nodded to indicate his understanding. Back then, the massacre throne nearly caused him to fall into the killing Tao, unable to extricate himself. Even without Elder Bai's reminder, Xiao Chen would still be cautious about the death throne. What is that? Suddenly, a disciple on the deck pointed to the front and exclaimed. Xiao Chen followed that disciple's gaze and saw a completely white palanquin draped in white muslin drifting in the starry heavens in a ghostly manner. It looked very frightening. When one looked carefully, one would discover that the palanquin was not flying on its own. Instead, 8 green spirits were carrying the palanquin, rushing quickly through the starry heavens. 8 ghosts carrying the palanquin. They are martial sage experts of the ghost race. They are chasing in the direction of the corpse dragon warships. Elder Bai had a bad impression of the corpse race and the ghost race. He said in disgust, there is no need to care about them. Just let them fight each other. The corpse race and the ghost race both cultivated the death great Tao. One collected the corpses of the dead, and the other collected the souls of the dead. They developed in completely different directions. Furthermore, they did not like each other. Battles often broke out between the corpse race and the ghost race. There were countless cases of them undermining each other. Hence, the appearance of this ghost palanquin was not too surprising to Elder Bai and the other 2. However, Xiao Chen was very interested in that ghost palanquin. His spiritual sense chased after it for a long time. If Xiao Chen guessed right, the master of the corpse dragon worship might have given up on the death throne temporarily because of the ghost palanquin in hot pursuit. Suddenly, the curtains of the ghost palanquin parted. Xiao Chen clearly saw the appearance of a delicate person. He could not help but be startled and take a step back involuntarily. There was clearly a female ghost sitting in the ghost palanquin with a long tongue sticking out. Her eyes were like black holes, and blood flowed out of her 7 orifices. When Xiao Chen looked carefully, he discovered that what he saw earlier was just an illusion. The female ghost had vanished. A girl with fair skin and a cold expression in a red dress smiled meaningfully at Xiao Chen before closing the curtains again. This mysterious ghost race girl was startling. Her skin was as white as snow. Her face was cold and emotionless, and her long hair cascaded down her back like a waterfall. However, she was shockingly beautiful. This mysterious woman from the ghost clan was the epitome of the word shocking. Did she notice the death throne in her hand? Xiao Chen took a few steps back. He still could not calm down. The huge contrast startled him. Xiao Chen, are you all right? The one who spoke was Cui Hao. In the earlier battle, Xiao Chen had saved his life. Cui Hao was not a petty person in the first place. After receiving this favor, his resentment for Xiao Chen lessened significantly. Xiao Chen recovered his wits and smiled. I'm fine. My foot slipped. Elder Bai, who was in front, turned his head back and gave Xiao Chen a deep look. Then, he said, come with me. The other party's gaze made Xiao Chen feel uncertain. He muttered to himself as he followed the other party. They entered the warship's hold and continued walking until they reached the highest floor of the warship. The top floor had windows on all sides. No matter where one looked, one would be able to see the boundless charm of the boundless astral world. Have a seat. This old man apologizes on behalf of the two vice palace masters for exposing the secret of the massacre throne, Elder Bai said sincerely as he extended his hand and made an inviting gesture. Earlier, Xiao Chen had refused to leave the warship. Elder Bai had noticed this. After some analysis, he figured out the true reason. Based on what happened later, he could easily figure out the real reason after a slight analysis. Xiao Chen sat down and said, Palace Master is too polite. The matters of the world are hard to predict. This junior did not suffer any losses. The injuries I suffered are still bearable. Furthermore, I obtained the death throne. Although there was a slim chance of survival, it was still a fortuitous encounter. Elder Bai sighed gently and smiled bitterly. You are oversimplifying things. This is not a fortuitous encounter but a calamity, a great calamity. The evil king was a famous sovereign martial emperor during the ancient era. Even grandmaster-level martial sages would be tempted by the throne he left behind. If I did not see wrong earlier, the ghost race girl in the white palanquin noticed you as well. The two sides definitely have important matters to attend to. Once they deal with these trivial matters, they will definitely send their experts to find you and retrieve the death throne as well as the massacre throne. When the Scarlet Throne was forced to be exposed, Xiao Chen had already expected such a thing. Elder Bai's analysis was within his expectations, so he waited quietly for the rest. When we return to the Haotian Star this time, I will help you find a will clone of the sect master to protect your life at a crucial moment. Indeed, the Haotian sect would not ignore such a situation. Xiao Chen raised his hand and said, Many thanks, Elder Bai. Elder Bai smiled gently and said, Perhaps I am exaggerating. Even if the ghost race and the corpse race know that you have two thrones, they will not spread the news. The two races both wanted to obtain the thrones. If they spread the news and other experts found out, it would undoubtedly make it more difficult for him to obtain the thrones. Xiao Chen thought about the girl in the 8-ghost palanquin. He asked, Palace Master, what is the background of the girl in the 8-ghost palanquin? Even the two vice palace masters were shocked to see her. Elder Bai thought for a while before replying, that white palanquin looks ordinary. In reality, it is a famous secret treasure of the ghost race. Its owner is the ghost empress Shisun, an expert on the same level as Emperor Wu. However, based on the person in the palanquin, he should be her descendant or disciple. However, for her to bestow this secret treasure to her, her talent is definitely not low. As the two chatted, Elder Bai used this topic to explain some things about the ghost race and the corpse race to Xiao Chen. In terms of individual strength, the ghost race and the corpse race were far ahead of the 5 major races of the Kunlun realm. However, the two races cultivated the death great Tao. One hooked souls, and the other dug graves. What they did went against the heavenly Tao. Hence, the population of the two races could not develop. The distribution of power in the ghost domain and the corpse domain was not as complicated as that of the human race and the fiend race. They only had one sect, the corpse god palace and the spirit palace. Although there were conflicts between factions, they were much better than the human race and the fiend race, far less complicated than the human race and the fiend race. The two races normally kept a low profile. Of the two races, the ghost race was the most mysterious. The ghost race cultivators were born with yin-yang eyes, which allowed them to see all sorts of wandering souls invisible to the naked eye. Chapter 796. Rumor had it that the headquarters of the Netherworld Palace was located in the Nine Hells Purgatory, and that there was a grand formation there that could draw in the souls of dead people. Of course, rumors were just rumors. The Nine Hells of Purgatory was a forbidden land of the Kunlun realm. It was buried more than 90,000 kilometers underground. Aside from the Nether River that flowed to the land of Absolute Yin, there were all sorts of terrifying scenes. Even Emperor Wu didn't dare to barge in recklessly. There were many unsolved mysteries that he still couldn't find the answers to. As they spoke, a resplendent and charming star appeared in Xiao Chen's vision. With just a glance, he was deeply captivated. Compared to the surrounding dark and lifeless dead stars, this star's charm was simply too great, even though it was too far away to be seen clearly. However, it made one instinctively feel a throbbing from the bottom of one's heart. It had an indescribable attraction. Is this the human emperor planet? Bushan Palace's stronghold in the starry sky. I wonder which ancient senior had the power to transform such a huge star. Xiao Chen had noticed this star in the jade pendant on his chest. Now that he saw it with his own eyes, he immediately recognized it. It was refined by the Dragon's Gate's Qing Emperor 50,000 years ago. He modified a dead star single-handedly, turning it into the vibrant state it is now. When Elder Bai mentioned the Dragon Sect Qing Emperor, his eyes naturally revealed a trace of reverence. Many sects could build a stronghold in the starry sky, but that was only to open up a base in a certain part of a star. It was impossible to transform an entire star. Compared to the human emperor's star, there was a world of difference. Of course, the human sovereign planet was much smaller than the Kunlun continent. However, it had been completely transformed into an ancient planet with life. Every place on the planet was suitable for human habitation. Even ordinary mortals could survive here. Xiao Chen's eyes were filled with shock. He had originally thought that it was refined and transformed by the ancient human race. He didn't expect that it was transformed by the Qing Emperor from 10,000 years ago. You must be very shocked, right? During the ancient era, the Kunlun continent was rich in resources. There are all sorts of ancient ruins, immortal cities, and cave abodes. Coupled with the fact that the various races are often at war with each other, very few ancient almighties would think of establishing a stronghold in space. Elder Bai continued, the true exploration of the starry heavens started after the War of Emperors in the savage battlefield. This matter is closely related to the deep abyss demonic world. What's the connection? Xiao Chen's interest was piqued and he asked curiously. After the War of Emperors, the Kunlun realm declined. The situation of the peak of the martial epoch never appeared again. The demon world's ambition to regain control of Kunlun is also growing day by day. They opened up a distant heavenly road in the boundless starry sky. After working hard for 10,000 years, they finally killed their way over from the other side of the starry sky. In the past, the invasion of the demon realm could only come through the spatial rift between the two realms. However, spatial cracks only existed for a short period of time, and there were spatial storms around, so opening them was not easy. Not many people would come. Although the demonic tribulation would be terrifying, it would not be a disaster. As long as Emperor Wu held down the fort, they would be able to ensure the safety of the region. This was nothing in the eyes of the powerhouses. However, at that time, the ones who descended from the starry sky and broke through the barrier of the sky was the demonic world's army. The 18 demon monarchs personally arrived, deeply shocking the various races of the Kunlun realm. Although the Kunlun realm managed to obtain victory after much difficulty, several ancient races died in the war. After this war, the various races of the Kunlun realm thoroughly realized the importance of the starry sky. Aside from obtaining resources, defending against the demon world's invasion was also of utmost importance. In the distant depths of the starry sky, there was a vast astral battlefield. On the other side of the astral battlefield, the demon world's base in the starry sky could not be truly eliminated. Sometimes, the demonic world held the advantage, leaping across the astral battlefield and forcing back the various races of the Kunlun realm. During the most dangerous times, they even pushed back to the barrier of the sky. Sometimes, the Kunlun realm held the advantage, leaping across the astral battlefield and nearly killing all the demons on the other side. The current situation was a stalemate. That kind of endless war in the starry sky had not happened for 10,000 years already. The astral battlefield became the peak experiential training ground for the junior generation experts of the Kunlun realm and the demonic world. Without advancing to martial sage, one would not even be qualified to enter. The astral battlefield was the strongest experiential training ground in this universe. Without advancing to martial sage, one would not even be qualified to enter. When Xiaochen heard this, he could not help but feel his blood surge. However, he could only think about it for now. To him, it was still too far away. In the vacuum of the universe, there was no air. If one wanted to travel through the starry sky, they would need to circulate their veritable essence energy at every moment, which was very taxing. A regular inferior grade martial sage would not be able to remain in the starry sky for long. At most, they would be able to last a month before they had to find a place to recover. Otherwise, they would end up as desiccated corpses, forever lost in the universe. There was no distinction between night and day in the darkness. Xiaochen had no idea how much time had passed. When Xiaochen returned to the deck, he felt that about 1 day had passed. Then, the Haotian sect's King grade warship stopped on a star with a diameter of 1,500 kilometers. This star was only 1,500 kilometers in diameter. It had to be said that this star was indeed very small. At the very least, with Xiaochen's speed, he could easily make a round trip if he did not run into any danger. The warship stopped beside a black mountain range. The surroundings were desolate, filled with black soil. When Xiaochen stepped on it, he felt a strong gravity. This somewhat overturned his previous understanding of the starry sky. It looked like he could not apply the knowledge of the starry sky of his previous life to the starry sky of this world. Not far from the mountain range was a long, winding black river. The river was pitch black. As it was too far away, the naked eye could not see what was flowing. Blackwater Star was named after this river. There was a forest on the other side of the river. Thick black clouds drifted endlessly above the forest, making it look very mysterious. Be careful. I will go and collect the spirit vein. Split into 2 teams, each with a vice palace master leading the team to kill astral beasts. Do not leave the team, Elder Bai said with an extremely grave expression after gathering everyone together. Of the 100-odd people, there was a team of 50. Each team had a vice palace master leading the way. The 2 vice palace masters were roughly equal in strength. Hence, there was no saying who would be safer. Xiaochen and Cui Hao were split into the same team. Since the 2 of them were stronger, the vice palace masters arranged for them to be at the back in case of any mishaps. I really couldn't tell. This is your first time entering the starry sky, yet you are not nervous at all. Along the way, the 2 slowly grew familiar with each other. Cui Hao voiced the doubts in his heart. Xiaochen did not feel anything. This was his nature. He could easily adapt to any environment. Furthermore, even if he was nervous, he would not show it on his face. Changing the topic, Xiaochen asked, how strong are the astral beasts? With your strength, can you kill them alone? Cui Hao revealed a grave expression and said, there are many types of astral beasts. They are roughly divided into ranks, from rank 1 to rank 6. A rank 1 astral beast is as strong as a half-sage. A rank 2 astral beast is as strong as a martial sage. A rank 3 astral beast is as strong as a medial grade martial sage. A rank 4 astral beast is as strong as a superior grade martial sage. A rank 5 astral beast is comparable to a Grand Master level martial sage. As for a rank 6 astral beast, only the blue-robed emperor can deal with it. As for me, I can deal with a regular rank 1 astral beast alone. However, if I run into a powerful one, I will have to be careful. Otherwise, I might even lose my life. Unexpectedly, the lowest-ranked astral beast was as strong as a half-sage. This was truly flabbergasting. Xiaoqin said, only rank 6. Don't tell me there are no astral beasts above rank 6. Cui Hao smiled and said, naturally, there are. However, astral beasts above rank 6 are simply too horrifying. They can swallow up a star in one gulp and are known as destroyers. We will not be able to find them in this starry domain. We will have to go even deeper to find them. Furthermore, only the Emperor Wu can deal with them. As they were chatting, Xiaoqin suddenly stopped. He fixed his gaze on a sharp black rock at the back of the group. The black rock was 1 meter tall and had an irregular cylindrical shape. As it moved from the bottom to the top, it slowly became thinner and sharper at the top. Cui Hao asked, "What's wrong?" Xiaoqin waved his hand, indicating for Cui Hao to move aside. Then, he walked over to the sharp black rock and reached out to grab the hard rock. Rise! All the energy in his body surged as Xiaoqin shouted. Then, he grabbed the top of the rock and pulled. More than 1 million kilograms of force burst out. Rumble. Cracks appeared on the ground. Following that, the rock shattered and flew into the air, shooting out in all directions. The entire ground shook violently. Everyone, scatter! The Vice Palace Master in front shouted. The 50-odd people in the group reacted very quickly. They pushed off the ground and shot out. Cui Hao's expression changed slightly. What Xiaoqin lifted was not a rock. It was clearly the tail of an astral beast. That astral beast was 300 meters long. It looked like a huge crocodile. However, its skin was covered in sharp black rocks, looking horrifyingly hard. Black rock crocodile, an ordinary rank 2 astral beast. Its strength is equal to an inferior grade martial sage. It is very good at hiding its aura and can travel underground freely. Someone recognized this astral beast and was extremely astonished. If Xiaoqin had not fished it out in advance, someone would have been injured or eaten by this black rock crocodile. Xiaoqin grabbed the 20-meter-long tail of the black rock crocodile and leaped into the air. Then, he lifted this huge creature and swung it wildly in the air. Bang! 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 As Xiaoqin swung the black rock crocodile, he descended to the ground and smashed the huge body of the black rock crocodile into the ground. This repeated over and over, causing the ground to rumble. The rocky skin of the black rock crocodile fell off piece by piece. It tried to use the force of its tail to fling Xiaoqin away several times, but it did not succeed. Instead, Xiaoqin flung the black rock crocodile into the ground continuously. As he burned his vital qi, he used 1,100,000 kilograms of force to toy with this rank 2 astral beast. The group of people was dumbfounded. Was this still a horrifying rank 2 astral beast? Why was it like a toy in Xiaoqian's hands? The Vice Palace Master was also slightly stunned. As far as he knew, the black rock crocodile was not only very strong but also very capable. Chapter 797. However, after Xiaoqin grabbed its tail and refused to let it go, it could not do anything. Xiaoqin swung the black rock crocodile to the ground, not giving it a chance to move at all. The black rock crocodile let out a horrifying shriek, rumbling endlessly. Everyone watched as Xiaoqin twirled the black rock crocodile around like a whip. For some reason, sympathy welled up in everyone's heart. That black rock crocodile was really unlucky. After a long time, the black rock crocodile's shrieks grew softer and softer. Finally, there was no sound. Suddenly, Xiaoqin felt the black rock crocodile's hard tail loosen. A group of previous true inheritors exclaimed, "What a freak!" They quickly flew over to take a look. They saw that the black rock crocodile was badly mangled, no different from mud. If they had not seen it before, they would not have been able to tell that this was a rank 2 astral beast, the black rock crocodile. It was as strong as an inferior grade martial sage. When Cui Hao flew over, he was speechless. An astral beast actually died just like that. He smiled bitterly and said, Xiao Chen, go and see if there is an astral core. Any astral beast could fly freely in the starry heavens. By absorbing the energy of the universe, they had a chance of producing an extremely precious energy crystal core, an astral core. Xiao Chen scanned the pile of flesh and blood with his spiritual sense twice. Then, he discovered a crystal core with extremely dense energy. Joy appeared on his face as he stretched out his hand. A suction came out, and a white astral core appeared in Xiao Chen's hand. The eyes of the others lit up, revealing envious expressions. They said, unexpectedly, an astral core appeared. This Xiao Chen is really lucky. Although the white astral core is an inferior grade astral core, it is more than enough to sell for a few thousand black astral coins. When Xiao Chen heard the discussions of the surrounding people, he carefully put away the astral core. He asked, black astral coins? Cui Hao, what is a black astral coin? Cui Hao also had a somewhat envious expression in his eyes. He explained, black astral coins are essentially the same as astral coins. However, they contain denser astral iron and are worth even more. All the large trading centers in the starry heavens use black astral coins for transactions. However, your luck is really good. The chances of an astral core appearing in a rank 2 astral beast and below are pitifully low. This black rock crocodile is just an ordinary rank 2 astral beast. As soon as they set off, Xiao Chen already had such a harvest. For the rest of the journey, the true inheritors of the previous batches all rubbed their eyes and searched for hidden astral beasts. He managed to find several astral beasts. After a few battles, he managed to kill quite a few astral beasts. However, none of them had condensed an astral core. Upon seeing this, the Vice Hall Master smiled without saying a word. Along the way, he was like a spectator, neither pointing out the hidden astral beasts nor lending a helping hand. He allowed the group of disciples to freely fight the astral beast. The unknown black lava flowed downstream in the riverbed. From time to time, bubbles would appear and float out. When the bubbles burst, there would be violent explosions. The entire riverbed was covered in such bubbles. A heavy smell of sulfur spread in the air, making everyone frown. This river was the Blackwater River that Xiao Chen and the others saw in the distance. What flowed in this river was not water but this somewhat disgusting lava filled with intense energy. The group of 50 killed all sorts of astral beasts along the way and finally arrived at the riverbank. When they saw this scene, they were not very surprised. After all, anything could happen in the boundless starry heavens. A river flowing with black lava was not something strange or incomprehensible. The Vice Hall Master looked around before fixing his gaze on the black forest on the other side of the river. Xiao Chen, Cui Hao, I'll leave this place to you. I'll make a trip to the forest and be back soon. After saying that, his figure gently drifted over the wide black river and headed for the black forest, slowly disappearing from everyone's sight. Clearly, this was not Cui Hao's first time dealing with this matter. After giving some instructions to his fellow disciples, he returned. Along the way, the group had not fought many battles. However, they were still somewhat fatigued. So they closed their eyes to rest or chatted idly. Their tones were filled with anticipation. Xiao Chen looked at the black forest. If he did not guess wrong, the Vice Hall Master should have gone in to hunt astral beasts of rank 3 and above. The Vice Hall Master left only astral beasts of rank 2 and below. Then, he let the group of people in and left them alone. Based on the fact that the Vice Hall Master did not run into any rank 3 astral beasts along the way, it was easy to figure this out. Indeed, not long later, sharp roars came from that black forest. Clearly, an intense battle was taking place. When we enter that black forest tomorrow, we should fight on our own, Cui Hao said as he tossed out a flask of wine, sitting across from Xiao Chen. Xiao Chen caught the flask of wine and took a swig. Then, he asked, how long have you been in the Heavenly Battle Palace? It looks like you are already very familiar with this experiential training. Cui Hao took a sip of wine and smiled somewhat disappointedly. It has been about 10 years. The experiential training is usually like this. They hunt down astral beasts that can kill us in an instant. Then, they scatter us and toss us in to fight on our own. 10 years sounded like a long period of time, but in Cui Hao's eyes, he didn't see many traces of time. Given Cui Hao's talent, he could definitely advance to martial sage before the age of 50. After advancing to martial sage, his lifespan would increase to 500 years. 10 years was indeed nothing in the long years that followed. However, at this moment, Cui Hao's expression appeared somewhat gloomy, looking very lonely. Xiao Chen, what is the Tianwu domain like now? Have you heard of these people? Suddenly, Cui Hao changed the topic, asking a question that had nothing to do with the experiential training. He mentioned several names, asking if Xiao Chen knew them. Every time Cui Hao mentioned a name, Xiao Chen would shake his head, indicating that he had not heard of them. When Cui Hao heard that, the originally gloomy expression in his eyes turned even more sorrowful. Only when Cui Hao mentioned a name did Xiao Chen answer, and Juanxi. This person is very incredible now. He fought to a draw with the divine martial gates Feng Wuji and became the new holy scion of the Tianwu domain. He is now the most famous demonic genius. When Cui Hao heard this, he was stunned at first. Then, he burst out laughing. He laughed somewhat crazily. He took a big gulp of wine and said, "The waves of the river are endless." 10 years ago, the glorious and brilliant young talents were unrivaled. I did not expect that 10 years later, no one would know of them. Xiao Chen suddenly understood. It looked like the names that Cui Hao mentioned were incredible people back then, comparable to the 7 giants of today. They were all glorious and famous. Unfortunately, the age of geniuses had arrived. These names, which could have been passed down for generations, were overshadowed by the radiance of the later generations. The more tragic ones became the stepping stones for others. During ordinary times, becoming a half-sage at the age of 30 was already a startling matter. However, in this age of geniuses, they were just ordinary geniuses, unable to cause any ripples. Of the 7 giants, which one of them did not become a half-sage before the age of 30? They killed the older generation half-sage evil cultivators like they were pigs or dogs. Although they were full of lofty sentiments and lofty aspirations, the waves at the front did not have the time to express their aspirations before they were smashed to death by the waves at the back on the beach. Furthermore, it was the kind of ruthless stride that surpassed them, leaving them so far behind that their backs could not be seen. The peak of the age of geniuses only regretted being born at the wrong time, coming too early. To the cultivators who pursued the great Tao for thousands of years, this was truly a kind of sorrow. Outsiders would not be able to understand that sorrow. And Juanxi. 10 years ago, that brat could not even last 100 moves against me. Now, even the mythical Holy Sun cannot subdue him. After Cui Hao finished the wine in the flask, he poured it a few times. When he discovered that there was no water left, he casually tossed the wine flask into the surging black water. With a bang, it shattered into pieces. Xiao Chen remained silent. No wonder Cui Hao lost his composure when he heard that Juanxi had such accomplishments. It turned out that there was such a secret behind it. Cui Hao glanced at the previous true inheritors not far away, resting with their eyes closed. He said, "Xiao Chen, did you know? If nothing unexpected happens, most of the people in the Heavenly Battle Palace will advance to martial sage before the age of 100. In ordinary times, becoming a martial sage before the age of 100 might not be considered an absolute genius, but they will definitely become an overlord. After entering the Heavenly Battle Palace, these people all have all sorts of dreams in their hearts. However, you came and shattered all these dreams." Feeling suspicious, Xiao Chen asked, "Me? Actually, I have to thank you for coming early. Otherwise, if a large group of people came, it would have been even more unbearable. Although they have always been in the Heavenly Battle Palace, they know a little about the Age of Geniuses. They more or less guessed the ending. Your arrival only woke them up," Cui Hao said in a somewhat sullen voice. Cui Hao said in a low voice. Although he was talking about them, whether he admitted it or not, he, Cui Hao, was indeed one of the people who had been beaten awake. This time, the two chatted for a long time. Cui Hao talked about the geniuses and outstanding talents of his generation, the names of those who had been outstanding in their time. Xiaochen also talked about the current Tianwu domain, about the 7 giants who were undefeatable, about the demonic geniuses like the sovereign noble clans Yan Shisan, and about the various outstanding talents of the Tianwu domain. In the end, Cui Hao drank too much and slowly fell asleep, leaving only Xiaochen to talk. Xiaochen spoke of his own story, his experiences along the way. He recalled many things and remembered many people's names. These names were once famous existences in the Sky Dome realm. Now, no one knew where they were. No one knew if they would rise up again one day. Toward the end, Xiaochen suddenly understood something. The problem that perplexed him not long ago suddenly became clear. For the Purple Thunder divine incantation to break through from the 6th layer to the 7th layer, one had to undergo a lightning tribulation and a heart tribulation. Furthermore, if one was not careful, one would die, turning into ashes. At that time, Xiaochen was indeed afraid. He was afraid of losing. He was afraid that after he died, he would have nothing. He was afraid that the fame that he had worked so hard for would be gone in an instant. Xiaochen thought too highly of himself. He worried that after he turned into dust, he would be forgotten by the later generations. Hence, he felt afraid. Chapter 798. However, when one looked up at the starry heavens, there were countless stars. Even the most resplendent solar star would die of old age one day. In the past, Cui Hao had been very spirited as well. However, in less than 10 years, he became unknown. His glorious name faded with the wind. What did he, Xiaochen, count for? Even if time passed and he reached the peak of the Great Tao, someone would eventually surpass him after tens of thousands of years. The river surged, and the waves were merciless. No one could stand at the peak forever. The peak was meant to be surpassed in the first place. With a panoramic view of the starry heavens, the expression in Xiaochen's eyes became increasingly clear and bright. I don't care what others think of me 10,000 years from now. In this life, I will do my best to reach the peak and fight for the first rank. Even if I die, I will have no regrets. The next day, the Vice Palace Master returned from the Black Forest, reeking of blood. The cultivators who were either resting with their eyes closed or chatting idly all had grave expressions. Everyone knew that this trial was about to truly begin. The Heavenly Battle Palace's experiential training had always been cruel. People like the Vice Palace Master would not help you. You had to deal with all the difficulties and dangers yourself. Unless there was an astral beast that could instantly kill a cultivator appeared. Only in such a cruel fight could one truly bring out one's potential. Only then could one truly achieve the experiential training's purpose. Otherwise, everyone knew that no matter what, they would not face the threat of death. They would feel that they had a path of retreat and would never be able to bring out their full potential. I have already slaughtered all the rank 3 astral beasts. I have also killed some of the peak rank 2 ferocious astral beasts that can instantly kill you. The rest will depend on yourselves, the Vice Palace Master said sullenly as he swept his gaze over the group of 50-odd people. This was not the first time the previous true inheritors had participated in such an experiential training, so they were mentally prepared. All of them soared into the air and revealed a murderous intent in their eyes. Then, they silently headed for the Black Forest. Xiaochen followed the crowd and carefully entered the Black Forest, starting his first small-scale experiential training in the starry heavens. The high-grade astral beasts in the forest had already been killed. To Xiaochen, this was not really dangerous. In fact, it was rather ordinary. However, hunting astral beasts also gave Xiaochen an opportunity to practice the lightning tribulation saber technique. The brand new lightning tribulation saber technique required intense battles to accumulate familiarity. 3 days later, some of the injured disciples were forced to withdraw helplessly. They dragged their blood-stained bodies to the Vice Hall Master to treat their injuries. With each passing day, a large number of disciples would emerge from the forest. Most of the people had gained something. A few of them even discovered ores in the forest that were no less valuable than the flame crystal stones, causing them to smile happily. There were also some people who were barely alive when they walked out, chased by the astral beasts into a sorry state. 6 days later, only Xiao Chen and Cui Hao were left in the team of 50 people. On the other side of the Blackwater River, one could see the occasional flickering of lightning in the forest. There was also the drifting yellow moonlight. Clearly, Xiao Chen and Cui Hao still had energy to spare. However, around dusk, Cui Hao came out with a joyful expression. When the others asked around, they found out that Cui Hao had obtained 2 astral cores in this experiential training. This was a great harvest, so they all felt envious. 8 days later, 100 bolts of berserk electric pythons suddenly shot out from the black forest and soared into the sky. They were 100 purple electric pythons. Under the observation of the previous true inheritors, they all transformed at the same time, turning from pythons into flood dragons. They roared ferociously at the boundless starry heavens, giving off a bright light that tore through the sky. Cui Hao's expression changed. He muttered, "It looks like his lightning tribulation saber technique improved again." The instant the electric light vanished, a white figure appeared in the sky above the forest, quickly descending towards the place where everyone was gathered. Soon, Xiaochen gently floated down, holding the lunar shadow saber as he slowly landed. When the Vice Palace Master saw the withdrawn killing chi and calm expression in Xiaochen's eyes, he vaguely felt that Xiaochen was somewhat unfathomable. After the experiential training ended, the 2 teams met up. The other team had been waiting for a long time already. After everyone was gathered, the King Grade warship started its return journey. The journey back to planet Haotian was very smooth. They did not run into any ghost race or corpse race cultivators. 1 day later, they arrived safely at planet Haotian. Xiaochen collected the deep-sea coumarin grass and the spiritual milk to recover quintessence. Then, he returned to the Heaven Series training room. There was less than half a month left in the Heaven Series training room. Xiaochen did not want to waste any more time. After resting for a while, Xiaochen entered deep thought. Then, he started to count his gains on this trip. With a flip of his hand, 2 flame crystal rocks appeared in his palm. One had a dim luster, and the other had a moving glow. The flame crystal rocks were of great help to cultivators of the state of fire. However, they were not very useful to Xiaochen. However, absorbing these 2 flame crystal rocks had a high chance of directly comprehending the state of fire, saving him a lot of effort. After thinking for a while, Xiaochen finally decided not to sell this flame crystal rock. Perhaps he might be able to use it in the future. This was a treasure that could only be found and not sought. Once he sold it, he would have to spend several times the price to buy it again. After that, Xiaochen took out 2 white astral cores. After obtaining an inferior grade astral core from the Black Rock Crocodile, he continued his experiential training in the Black Forest. After killing more than 200 rank 2 astral beasts, he finally obtained another astral core. The astral core contained horrifying energy. Xiaochen could clearly feel it. If this energy exploded, even his physical body would not be able to endure it. In the starry heavens, astral cores had many uses. Not only could they be embedded in all sorts of spirit weapons, but they could also be used as the energy source of all sorts of warships. In fact, if one were to use it directly and cause it to explode, they could even injure their enemies. However, no one would be so wasteful as to use such a precious treasure. Xiaochen looked at the lunar shadow saber in his hand. This saber was a heaven-ranked spirit weapon. Most sovereign noble clan scions or powerful demonic geniuses would have weapons of the same grade as subdivine weapons. And Juanshi's true dragon lightning whip, First Senior Sister's purple bow, Yan Shisan's heavenly ice sword, and the inherited holy weapons of the 3 holy masters were all of the same grade. A good weapon could greatly increase a cultivator's strength. Previously, Juanshi did not have a suitable weapon, which was why he could not defeat the divine martial gates Feng Wuji. It was time for the lunar shadow saber to be upgraded. The demonic cores embedded in it could no longer keep up. They had to be replaced with high-ranked astral cores. The other materials needed to be replaced. Xiaochen withdrew his gaze and said softly, I have to advance to martial sage as soon as possible. No, time is too tight. The resources and materials needed to upgrade the lunar shadow saber to a subdivine weapon would definitely be vast. If he did not advance to martial sage, he would not be able to find so many resources. The opportunity to advance to martial sage lay in the breaking sage pill. It looked like after obtaining the heavenly dew divine spring, he had to make a trip to the Ying clan. Xiaochen collected his thoughts and finally took out the death throne. This was an absolute treasure that everyone loved and hated at the same time. A light flashed on Xiaochen's forehead as he stared at the throne floating in the air. After a while, he finally made up his mind. Xiaochen focused his vast spiritual sense on the purple lightning talisman. With a flash of electric light, he entered a world of death filled with black qi. Xiaochen's spiritual sense turned into a body. He held the purple lightning talisman in his right hand as he looked calmly at the vast, boundless black death qi below. It looked like the world within the massacre throne. However, the scarlet sea was now black. Ha ha ha. To think that you actually dared to come in. This is my world. No one can escape. The black sea churned, and a strand of black qi came out of it. Then, it formed Wang Can's appearance. He looked at Xiaochen's spiritual sense with a sinister gaze. Wang Can's eyes were filled with boundless arrogance and insufferably arrogance, preparing to swallow up Xiaochen's spiritual sense. However, when he saw the purple talisman in Xiaochen's hand, this strand of Wang Can's spiritual mark was greatly startled. Horror appeared in his eyes as he thought of something. Then, he quickly dove into the sea below. Lightning was the most berserk and tyrannical energy in the world. Of all the energies, it dealt the greatest damage to evil mental bodies. Without this copy of the divine lightning and the immortal lightning talisman, Xiaochen would not have been so careless to send his spiritual sense into the death throne. Xiaochen remained expressionless as he pointed at Wang Can's spiritual mark. The purple talisman flew out and struck it before it dove into the Black Sea. Immediately, miserable shrieks rang out in this strange world. All sorts of hateful curses surged towards Xiaochen like the tide. Xiaochen did not care about them. He let the purple lightning talisman strike the other party until his body and soul were destroyed, completely disappearing from this world. After searching for a while and confirming that he could not find Wang Can's spiritual mark, Xiaochen stretched out his hand and retrieved the purple lightning talisman. However, Xiaochen's expression did not relax at all. Wang Can's spiritual mark was just an insignificant existence in the death throne. The truly powerful one was in the depths of this boundless sea. That was an existence that made Xiaochen feel fear. In the past, when he was on the massacre throne, he had suffered a lot from that existence's torture and torment. In a king-grade corpse dragon worship on the ancient starry heavens path, Wang Can paled and vomited a large mouthful of black blood. He said somewhat weakly, "Father, that person destroyed my spiritual mark in the death throne." The person Wang Can addressed as father was the expert with the golden corpse embroidered on his chest, who had blocked Elder by with a wave of his hand. This person smiled faintly and said unconcernedly, "This is for the best. You have not been able to subdue the evil king's mark in the death throne. If you hold on to it for a long time, it will be a hidden danger." Wang Can's expression changed. He asked, "Father, what do you mean?" Wang Can's father said sullenly, "His immortal will of thunder has a natural counter to this kind of spiritual mark. It might be able to completely destroy the death mark that the evil king left. At that time, you will obtain the complete death throne and become a powerful corpse king. If you can subdue the massacre throne as well, you will definitely be world-shaking." After Wang Can heard that, he could not help but reveal an excited expression. Chapter 799. The Black Sea roared ferociously in the world inside the throne. There seemed to be a boundless abyss in the distance, looking at Xiaochen emotionlessly. Immortal scripts slowly flowed on the purple lightning talisman in Xiaochen's hand, flickering with a faint golden light. Electricity crackled. Xiao Qin looked into the distance and entered deep thought. Massacre and death were one in the first place. Without massacre, there would be no death. Massacre was the method, and death was the result. The two were related to the beginning and the end. From a certain point of similarity, they should be the same state. With such a common state, Xiao Qin thought of reincarnation. The end did not mean the end. However, the state that reincarnation represented was very vast. It was not something that could be combined with massacre and death. Xiao Qin could only be sure of the answer after he collected the other 5 thrones. The others only focused on a single attribute of the throne. The corpse race and the ghost race wanted the death throne because it was compatible with the death Tao that they cultivated. They could better control corpses and ghosts, greatly increasing their strength. However, Xiao Qin thought even further. Of course, his answer might not be correct. When the 7 thrones merged, it did not represent reincarnation. It was the primal chaos, eternal life, or nothingness. No one could say for sure. Xiao Qin stared at the farthest part of the sea. In the end, he gave up on making a move. Ordinary people only needed to focus on one state to become a powerful expert. Right now, Xiao Qin had not even completely grasped the massacre Tao. If he tried to cultivate the death Tao, he would be seeking his own death. It was like an ant overestimating itself and trying to eat an elephant. Xiao Qian's spiritual sense flashed, and he leaped out. His vision returned to the real world. With a flip of his hand, he placed the death throne in his universe ring. If he could collect all 7 thrones in the future, he might be able to cultivate an unprecedented peak state. In less than half a month, the Sage War, which would determine the spots for the Heavenly Dew Divine Spring, would begin. He had to make good use of the Heaven Series training room. The pressure in the combat room increased. Ignoring his fatigue and hard work, Xiao Qin continued to stabilize his new lightning tribulation saber technique, bringing it closer to himself. 5 days later, when the spiritual milk ran out, Xiao Qin dragged his injured body to the cultivation room. Then, he frantically absorbed the spiritual energy of the spirit vein's origin under the prayer mat. Soon, the last day of the Heaven Series training room arrived. Xiao Qin took out the energy crystal of Emperor Wu's will clone. After activating the energy crystal, an old man made of light instantly appeared in the combat room of the Heaven Series training room. The old man's aura did not look very strong. At the very least, Xiao Qin did not feel any pressure. The will clone sealed in this crystal looks like it only has 100th or 1,000th of a martial emperor's strength. However, it should still have its combat experience and techniques. That should be enough. The old man wore robes of alternating blue and white. He stood there empty-handed as he looked at Xiao Qin, his eyes gleaming with spirit. He said, "My true body is already destroyed. This will clone has been used for several thousand years already. I can only appear for an hour now. Make good use of it." Xiao Qin nodded his head seriously. He slowly drew the lunar shadow saber and slowly accumulated his aura. A vast sea slowly appeared behind him. It was the dragon subduing Slash's blue dragon emerging from the sea. Xiao Qin had never used this crystal that sealed Emperor Wu's will avatar. He planned to use it to comprehend the 3rd move of the dragon subduing Slash. The lightning tribulation saber technique was a commonly used martial technique. The dragon subduing Slash was the true trump card. Rumble. 999 pillars of water soared into the sky. A blue dragon leaped out of the sea, and a 300-meter-long dragon-shaped saber chi instantly formed. Xiao Qin roared ferociously. It sounded like a true dragon roaring as he hacked at the old man in front. The old man was slightly stunned. When he saw the saber technique Xiao Qin executed, he said, "I have not seen the dragon subduing Slash for several tens of thousands of years. You learned it pretty well. Unfortunately, you are still far from great perfection." The old man kicked off the ground and gathered all his quintessence in his palm. He spun around and quickly dodged the strong wind formed by the dragon-shaped saber chi. Shao Chen used the choking hand to choke the neck of the dragon-shaped saber chi. The mighty and unparalleled dragon-shaped saber chi with a flourishing aura seemed to have struck its weakness, instantly scattering. Shao Chen was startled. He had not expected the blue dragon emerging from the sea to have such an opening. Shao Chen stomped on the air, and an inextinguishable dragon roar came from his body. His figure advanced rapidly. When his aura reached its peak, Shao Chen soared into the air. Auspicious clouds covered his body, materializing a soaring dragon. The old man's figure flickered. He smiled and said, "This move is pretty good. You have already grasped 80% of its essence." The old man's clothes fluttered, and his expression sank. He formed hand seals and pointed ferociously at Shao Chen, who was soaring like a true dragon. A huge finger seemed to come from beyond the heavens, carrying a strong heavenly might. It gently tapped Shao Chen's aura, pressing down on him the moment his aura rose. Bang! Blood leaked out of a corner of Shao Chen's mouth. The soaring dragon's momentum was instantly broken, and he tumbled a few times before standing up. As Shao Chen looked at the old man in the air, he entered deep thought. The strength that the other party used was no stronger than peak inferior grade martial sage. However, he could easily find the openings in Shao Chen's moves and break them. However, this was a good thing. Shao Chen was not afraid of openings. He was afraid of openings that he did not know and could still be pleased with himself. Again. The sounds of intense fighting rang out in the combat room once more. Although the old man was only an inferior grade martial sage, he relied on his vast combat experience and insight to torture Shao Chen to the point where he hovered between life and death. After more than 100 moves, Shao Chen finally patched up some of the weaknesses of Return of the Azure Dragon and Dragon Soars in the Sky. He had gained a lot. The light on the old man's body dimmed. Soon, he would return to the crystal. Shao Chen took a deep breath, and the blue dragon martial spirit in his dantian split into two. The quintessence it carried flowed along two different meridians. Slowly, two azure-colored dragon images appeared on the slender lunar shadow saber in Shao Chen's hand. They coiled around the saber. A speck of light as resplendent as the sun appeared at the tip of the saber. Dragon subduing Slash's third move, twin dragons playing with pearls. The saber tip flashed with light, and in an instant, it reflected the old man's figure. Then, it quickly flew towards him. The two dragon images formed and chased after that speck of light. When the old man saw this move, his expression turned somewhat grave. He glanced at that formless light, and his figure flickered around the combat room. However, no matter how the old man dodged, that speck of light locked onto the old man and chased him relentlessly. The two dragon images quickly formed behind it. The dragon scales on the old man's body were clearly visible. The dragon horns on the old man's head and the dragon chi he spat out made it hard to distinguish the real from the fake. A faint dragon might slowly spread out. Finally, the old man sighed helplessly and stopped. He said, "Never mind. I should have known that I would not be able to dodge such a shameless move." That speck of light instantly entered the old man's body, and the two blue dragons flew out. A strong wind blew, lightning flashed, and thunder roared. The old man threw a palm strike and circulated his quintessence, using the remaining energy to clash head-on with this move. An intense explosion rang out, accompanied by the horrifying fluctuations of surging quintessence. A wave of cyan light swept out. Cassier! Cassier! Several combat puppets stopped at the edge of the combat room instantly collapsed. When everything vanished, the old man's figure could no longer be seen. He must have returned to the crystal. Shao Chen panted, his complexion pale. This move used his origin energy and exhausted a lot of it. However, it looked like the effects were pretty good. Even Emperor Wu could not find any openings. Unable to dodge, he could only receive it head-on. Two dragons playing with pearls was just the beginning. If Shao Chen cultivated it further, he could execute 3 dragons playing with pearls, 4 dragons playing with pearls, and even the highest level of 9 dragons playing with pearls. When Xiaochen saw some of the precious combat puppets in the combat room shattered into pieces, he felt somewhat vexed. He did not know if the Haotian sect would call him over for compensation. Closing his eyes and sitting cross-legged, Xiaochen entered a state of selflessness. Then, he started to carefully comprehend his gains in the past hour, memorizing the openings of the first 2 moves of the dragon subduing slash. When the sky turned dark, Shui Lingling's cry came from outside the Heaven Series training room. Xiaochen opened his eyes and executed Thunder Dragon steps, leaping out the door in a few breaths. Shui Lingling glanced at Xiaochen and discovered that the expression in his eyes had become even more reserved. She could no longer see through him. When Xiaochen looked carefully, the purple heavenly sage laws behind him were actually hazy as well. She could only see countless electric sparks crackling and flickering endlessly. As Xiaochen walked, he gained a sharpness that had not been there before. He gave off a faint king-grade true dragon qi, which surprised Shui Lingling the most. In the past, Xiaochen had been this reserved as well, simple and unadorned. However, he had kept his sharpness hidden in his heart, not revealing it at all. Now, for some reason, he actually revealed a trace of his sharpness. Given his cultivation, it was not that he could not control this sharpness. Instead, he did it casually, not suppressing it on purpose. Did this mean that the unparalleled saber with unparalleled sharpness had already decided to leave its scabbard and fight for its place in this age of geniuses? With just one meeting, Shui Lingling thought of many things from Xiaochen. Furthermore, her guesses were very accurate. Xiaochen glanced at Shui Lingling, feeling somewhat astonished. Her improvement in the past month was no weaker than his. Xiaochen did not know where exactly she cultivated, but the effects were no weaker than in the Heaven Series training room. First senior sister, why are you looking for me? Xiaochen asked. Shui Lingling took out a crystal and handed it to Xiaochen seriously. This is a will clone that my master specially condensed for you. It has 1/10 of his strength. To condense this will clone, he needs to recuperate for 5 years. However, as long as a martial emperor does not appear, this will clone can protect your life at any time. Xiaochen received the crystal and felt the energy in it. It was much stronger than the aura of the old man in the cultivation room. Hence, what Shui Lingling said was true. Such a life-saving item was something that Xiaochen urgently needed. He could not help but have a favorable impression of this Haotian emperor, whom he had never met before. Ha! Let's go. Let's gather at the first elder's place. We are going to the Central Province's Bushin Palace. Chapter 800. Shui Lingling smiled gently and called out the profound sun bird. Then, she picked up Xiaochen and flew to a rather majestic transportation formation on the Haotian star. Spiritual energy filled the undulating mountain ranges. Lush vegetation filled the air, and spirit beasts roamed the place. The dense aura of life made it impossible to associate this place with the cold starry heavens. The surroundings of the Haotian sect of this star had been completely remodeled. It was not much different from the Kunlun realm. Xiaochen and Shui Lingling arrived above a transportation formation surrounded by 4 mountain peaks. The first elder, Han Qinghe, several inner sect elders, and the many true inheritors preparing to participate in the Sage War arrived. Yu Chenxi, Jun Si, and the others had all arrived long ago. When Xiaochen saw these familiar faces, he asked, First senior sister, could it be that we used this transportation formation to get directly to the Central Province's Bushin Palace? Shui Lingling smiled gently and said, What's wrong? Do you think that it is impossible? With enough astral cores, we can even send you to the Sky Dome realm. This is something the Haotian sect spent the blood and sweat of the 4th generation of Emperor Wu to build. Directly send me back to the Sky Dome realm? When Xiaochen heard this, his eyes lit up. He still had many ties to the Sky Dome realm. They were all there, Lu Riyue, Lu Suifeng, old friends of the Xiao clan. Xiao Yulan, Feng Feishue, Ying Yu, all these fresh names were etched in the depths of Xiaochen's mind. He had never forgotten them. In the past, Xiaochen had thought that he would not return until he reached Emperor Wu. However, now that he thought about it, this was a heartless promise. Martial Emperor was the peak of the martial Tao. Xiaoqian did not know how long it would take before he could reach it. Shui Lingling's ordinary words unintentionally touched the softest part of Xiaoqian's heart. Junior brother Xiaoqian, are you alright? We are going down. Xiaoqian came back to his senses, smiled, and gently landed on the ground. When the first elder, Han Qinghe, saw the two of them coming over, he gently waved his hand and called them to the side. His expression was somewhat grave as he said, "Let me tell you two some bad news. The sovereign noble clans of the Profound Domain will be coming to participate in the Sage Saint ranking of our Bushan Palace." Xiaoqian's expression did not change, but ripples appeared in his heart. The strength of the sovereign noble clans was comparable to the Holy Lands. Normally, they would not submit to the Bushan Palace. The ranking of the Proud Son of Heaven ranking did not include these people. Yan Shisan's horrifying strength. If all the scions of the sovereign noble clans were as strong as him, the Proud Son of Heaven ranking would not be able to rank them. If he wanted to get into the top 10 in this Sage War and obtain a spot for himself, he would probably have to face some difficulties. Shui Lingling said mockingly, "They must be here for the Heavenly Dew Divine Spring." Normally, these sovereign noble clans do not care about the life or death of the human race. Now, they know that they are part of the human race. The Heavenly Dew Divine Spring cleansed the marrow and cleansed the blood. It was infused with the Heavenly Tao's origin energy. It contained great luck, allowing a cultivator to advance to Martial Emperor before the age of 100. In Kunlun Mountain, it took 10,000 years for the Heavenly Dew Divine Spring to fill up. This was a rare opportunity. It would be hard for those sovereign noble clans not to think about it. Han Qinghe sighed. Under the combined pressure of the four sovereign noble clans, the Bushan Palace had no choice but to take a step back. If they really started a civil war, the human race would not be able to bear it. An inner sect elder at the side said helplessly, "We can only blame the three holy masters for not living up to expectations in the past few years. If the Dragon's Gate's Qing Emperor were still around, these sovereign noble clans would not dare to say anything." Han Qinghe said, "Now that things have come to this, there is no point in complaining. The two of you just have to do your best." There were many outstanding talents in history who did not soak in this Heavenly Dew Divine Spring. Han Qinghe spoke very generously, but everyone could hear the regret in the first elder's voice. Xiaoqian performed a cupped fist salute and said, "First elder, rest assured. Xiaoqian has received many favors from the Haotian sect. On this trip, I will definitely fight for a spot for the Haotian sect." As Xiaoqian spoke, he revealed his sharpness, showing great self-confidence. Shui Lingling said with a resolute expression, "First elder, rest assured. Shui Lingling will also do her best to fight for a spot for the Haotian sect." Han Qinghe smiled faintly. Under the influence of the two, he said with a heroic spirit, "Since the two of you are so confident, why would I say such discouraging words? I would be undervaluing myself too much. So what if the sovereign noble clans come? Let's go. Let's fight them for now." After the first elder spoke, he gave some instructions. The nearby inner sect elders started to slowly fill the complicated and vast interstellar transportation formation with high-ranked astral cores. So. Pillars of light shot up from the formation lines. Space started to fluctuate intensely, and a huge black hole appeared above everyone's heads. The interior of the black hole was intertwined with complex time and space coordinates. A boundless suction force surged out, directly pulling everyone in. Xiaoqian felt his body stretch infinitely. Finally, he turned into tiny particles. His body disappeared, leaving only his thoughts in this space-time tunnel. Xiaoqian flew off into the distance at a speed that cultivators could not comprehend. By the time Xiaoqian felt his body reassemble, the group had already arrived at another transportation formation. When they looked around, they saw a sea of people. The scenery also felt familiar. "We've arrived. Let's go directly to the Proud Son of Heaven ranking." Han Qinghe waved his hand, and a king-grade warship appeared. Then, he raised the Haotian sect's banner and led the group to the Bushin Palace's proud son of heaven ranking. The surroundings were densely packed with all sorts of warships and spirit beasts. The air buzzed with noise. All the superior grade sects of the entire Tianwu domain had arrived. The Sage War was a major event of the human race every 4 years. At that time, the proud son of heaven ranking would be completely disrupted and reshuffled. Coincidentally, this Sage War happened to coincide with the reopening of the Heavenly Dew Divine Lake. Such a grand scene was not strange at all. However, Xiaoqian was not used to going from absolute silence to such a noisy environment. The warship traveled through the somewhat crowded sky. After 1 hour, they finally arrived at the proud son of heaven ranking. The original sage wall had been moved somewhere else. Now, only 1,000 sage lamps remained, arranged in the shape of a pyramid. An empty space appeared within 5 kilometers of the proud son of heaven ranking. It was like a formless barrier covered the entire area from the sky to the ground. The warships that gathered from all directions collapsed from top to bottom. With the proud son of heaven ranking as the core, they formed a huge ring. Xiaoqian stood on the deck and looked down. At the bottom of the proud son of heaven ranking, he saw his lamp. He could not help but feel slightly stunned. Then, he revealed a smile. It had been close to 2 years. Unexpectedly, no one had been able to break his lamp yet. The Haotian sect's people are here. There were at least 3,000 or 4,000 warships stationed around the proud son of heaven ranking, from the ground to the sky. The flag on each warship represented a sect. With one glance, although there were many sects, the true 9 ranks of the great families were few in number. This was especially so for the ones like the Haotian sect, which could be considered part of the 9 ranks of the great families, which were even rarer. When the proud son of heaven ranking appeared, it immediately attracted the attention of several people, many of whom were old acquaintances of Xiaoqian. The full moon pavilions Feng Xingsheng, the battle realms Niu Deng, the Shiman noble clans Shiman Bao, the 1,000 mystery sects Hua Dao, the 7 giants Wang Meng, and the passionate young master, Murong Lingfeng, had all arrived long ago. I heard that the demonic genius who occupied the last rank of the proud son of heaven ranking for close to 2 years is on the Haotian sect's warship. That fellow is really a demonic genius. After coming to the Kunlun realm for 2 years, he already comprehended a will and defeated the extreme Yin sects by wuxue. However, he is really too insincere. He occupied the last rank for 2 years without bothering about it. Who knows how many new disciples of the various sects are cursing him in secret. There is no reward for being the last rank. This fellow does not know how to spend some time to increase his ranking. Xiaoqian felt somewhat surprised. He had not expected all the discussions about the Haotian sect to focus on him. Jun Si, who was at the side, smiled and said, "Junior brother Xiaoqian, it looks like your popularity now rivals that of the 7 giants. In the past, when others mentioned the Haotian sect, they talked about our first senior sister the most." When Shui Lingling heard this, she smiled casually and said, 7 giants. Now, there are no more 7 giants. If one does not comprehend a will, they will be eliminated by the passing of time. They will never be able to stand at the peak. Xiaoqian could not help but view her in a new light. Based on what Shui Lingling said, it seemed like she had comprehended a will long ago. However, he could not tell from her appearance. As Xiaoqian chatted with the others, the noisy scene suddenly turned quiet. It was like someone incredible had arrived. Pu Ci. Suddenly, a bright, dazzling holy light descended from the sky. Xiaoqian squinted slightly. 3 emperor-grade warships that surpassed king-grade slowly appeared in the sky. One looked like the deep-sea heavenly turtle, the black tortoise, one looked like the vermilion bird, the eastern divine bird, and one looked like the white tiger, the holy beast in the clouds. The holy light was very dazzling, enveloping everyone. The people of the 3 holy masters are coming out. The many cultivators, who had been silent for a while, looked up. Then, they all erupted in excitement. The voices turned into waves, rising and falling. As they drifted, several warships shook. The bright light could not obscure Xiao Chen's eyes. The boundless holy might could not suppress the surging hot-bloodedness in Xiao Chen's heart. The Phoenix's Passion Palace, the Divine Martial Gate, and the White Emperor City of the Three Holy Masters finally saw their true appearance. He wondered how glorious the Three Holy Masters were now. Whoosh! 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 Just at this moment, 4 warships appeared in the east. Holy might spread out, and the light they gave off did not diminish. Unexpectedly, they were also Emperor-grade warships that surpassed King-grade warships. From left to right, the flags on the warships had the words Yan, Ying, Jiang, and Lin written on them. These were the 4 sovereign noble clans of the human race. The warships of these 4 clans were no weaker than the 3 holy masters' warships. They seemed to be competing against each other. A few youths, male or female, stood at the bow of each warship. These were the absolute geniuses the sovereign noble clans sent to fight for the slots. This time, the 4 clans were very ambitious. Each clan wanted to obtain at least 2 slots, leaving only 2 for the other sects of the Tianwu domain. On the warship in the middle, a Jiang clan old man beckoned. 3 people jumped down from each of the other 3 warships, 1 old man and 2 youths.